Slap. A thick stack of documents slammed hard into Lin Chen's face. Sheets of A4 paper scattered across the floor like snowflakes. Lin Chen, do you have eyes in your head? Is this the Q3 quarterly report you drafted? Even a dog tapping random keys on a keyboard could turn out better work than this garbage. Su stood before the desk, arms folded across her chest. She wore a crisp, white formal blouse paired with a tailored black knee-length skirt. Smart black leather high heels clicked sharply against the office floor as she shifted her weight. She was strikingly beautiful, well-groomed, and known throughout the company as the department's attractive supervisor. But right now, every fine feature on her face twisted into sharp disdain. Lin Chen stared at the ground, his hands clenched tight at his sides. He bit down on his lip until he tasted the metallic tang of blood in his mouth. He wanted to hurl the office keyboard straight at her face. Yet he couldn't. He still hadn't scraped together rent for next month, and his parents back home needed money for their medical checkups. For adults, swallowing grievance was just part of daily life. Manager Su, I'll redo it right away, Lin Chen muttered quietly, bending to gather the scattered papers one by one. Redo it? You've got 10 minutes. Su let out a cold laugh, looking down on him from her height. If this report isn't sitting in my inbox 10 minutes from now, don't bother coming in tomorrow. The company doesn't keep dead weight. Colleagues at surrounding workstations stared rigidly at their monitors, clacking their keyboards furiously, none daring to draw her wrath. A few even secretly sent mocking messages about Lin Chen in the office group chat. Lin Chen sank back into his chair, staring at the garbled Excel spreadsheet, his chest heavy with stifled frustration. Just then, a cold, mechanical voice devoid of all emotion echoed directly inside his skull. All personnel, prepare yourselves. The survival game will commence in 30 seconds. The office fell dead silent instantly, every keyboard stroke cut off mid-sound. Who's that? Is someone pulling a prank over the intercom? A male coworker at the next desk stood up, glancing around wildly. Supervisor Su, is this some drill organized by admin? Another voice asked nervously. Su frowned, snapping irritably. Why are you all staring at me? How would I know? Get back to work at once. Anyone slacking off over this loses their full attendance bonus. Lin Chen did not move. He sat rooted in his chair, brows drawn tight. Something was deeply wrong. The voice hadn't come from the ceiling speakers, nor the computer speakers. It resonated directly within his mind, as if etched into his neurons. 20 seconds remaining. The countdown ticked onward. This time, chaos erupted across the office. Holy hell, that voice is inside my head too. Me as well. Did someone drug our water? Are we hallucinating? Coworkers scrambled to their feet, several pulling out their phones to dial the police. Even Su panicked, stumbling backward in her heels, face drained of color as she clamped her hands over her ears. Quiet, all of you. Shut up. Lin Chen leaned back against his office chair. Reading web novels was his only hobby after work, and this bizarre scenario felt eerily familiar to him. While everyone else drowned in terror, a flicker of excitement stirred in his chest. If this was real, if the world truly ended, would he never have to fix this miserable spreadsheet again? Would he never have to endure Su's venomous attitude? Lin Chen fixed his gaze on Su, a faint, bitter smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. To hell with his job. To hell with this suffocating life. 10, 9, 8. Lin Chen, what are you grinning about? Have you lost your mind? Su shrieked at the sight of his strange expression. 3, 2, 1. Countdown complete. Game initiated. The second the voice faded, blinding white light burst through the office windows. Lin Chen's vision washed out completely, and a violent sensation of weightlessness tore through him. Screams of utter terror from Su and the other co-workers rang in his ears. Then, silence. Thud. Lin Chen crashed heavily onto rough ground. The abrasive pavement scraped open his palms. He coughed violently, swatting away clouds of dust before scrambling upright, scanning his surroundings with sharp vigilance. He stood dead in the center of a wide abandoned street. Cracked asphalt stretched beneath his feet, tall weeds sprouting through every fissure. Rusted, derelict cars lined both sides of the road, their tires long rotted and deflated. Lifting his gaze, the bustling downtown skyline he knew was unrecognizable, swallowed whole by overgrown vegetation. Skyscraper glass facades lay shattered, exposed steel girders twisting like skeletal monsters against the gray sky. The architecture and plant life mirrored Earth closely, as if this world was an abandoned version of his home planet. Yet an indescribable eeriness hung thick in the air. Before Lin Chen could process his surroundings, that mechanical voice boomed inside his head once more, loud as a giant bell. Welcome to the wasteland planet. 1 billion eligible humans across Earth have been simultaneously transported to this world. All arrivals begin with zero supplies, no official identities, and no legal protections whatsoever. On this vast wasteland planet, survival is your sole objective. Warning: an extreme cold apocalypse will descend in 48 hours. Global temperatures will plummet to lethal lows, accompanied by a massive rampage of mutated wasteland creatures. 48 hours from now, any human caught outdoors without a sturdy shelter will face a 100% mortality rate. Fight to stay alive, survivors. The voice vanished entirely. Wind whistled through empty, ruined buildings, producing a mournful wail. Lin Shen patted down his pockets. They were empty. His phone, wallet, keys, all gone. He wore nothing but a cheap cotton shirt, black dress trousers, and leather dress shoes. He had been teleported alone to this desolate place. 48 hours, Lin Shen muttered to himself. He drew a deep breath, forcing calm over his racing thoughts. Despair and panic would serve no purpose now. The system had made it clear. A death sentence awaited them all in 2 days' time. Humans could not survive 3 full days without food and water, but without proper shelter, the extreme cold and mutated beasts would kill everyone within 48 hours. His top priorities: find a weapon, scavenge supplies, locate a viable shelter. Lin Shen's eyes locked onto a collapsed storefront along the street. Half the broken sign still read convenience store. He hurried toward it. The front door had long crumbled away, the ground carpeted with shattered glass and rubble. Shelves lay toppled, stripped bare. Not a scrap of food, not even an empty plastic bottle remained. Lin Shen refused to give up, combing through the debris. Moments later, beside a fallen concrete pillar, he spotted an exposed threaded steel reinforcing bar. He stepped forward, gripped the metal firmly, and pulled hard. Crash! Rubble tumbled free as he extracted a rusted steel rod roughly 1 meter long. Gripping the heavy metal bar in his hands, a small measure of confidence settled over him. The instant his fingers wrapped tight around the rod, ding! A crisp, melodic chime, vastly different from the earlier cold mechanical voice, sounded inside his mind. Host detected, first weapon obtained. Survival will activated. Wasteland shelter point system binding in progress 10, 50, 100. Binding successful. Lin Shen froze on the spot. He squeezed the steel bar tighter, his heart hammering wildly against his ribs. A system? Those web novel tropes are actually real? He whispered, eyes blazing with wild joy. A translucent pale blue virtual screen, visible only to him, projected across his field of vision. System function overview. 1. Shelter recruitment. On this wasteland, human survivors are your most valuable resource. The host may construct a personal shelter and recruit survivors to join. Point settlement. Every evening at 1800 hours sharp, the system will tally all official members residing within the host shelter. Each registered member grants the host 100 points daily. Point earnings scale infinitely with population size. System marketplace. Hosts may exchange accumulated points for any goods within the marketplace. Inventory covers food, clean water, weapons, construction blueprints, and nearly every conceivable item. Lin Shen scanned the text, breathing fast with excitement. 100 points per recruit every single day? 10 recruits would net 1,000 points daily. If he gathered 10,000 survivors, he would earn 1 million points each day without lifting a finger. In this wasteland where survival hung by a thread, he could endlessly farm points by recruiting more people. Ding! Host detected, first-time system binding. New user gift pack awarded. Open immediately. Open it. Lin Shen answered without hesitation. New user gift pack opened. Reward: Combat Enhancement X1. Tactical Combat Mindset X1 reward. Initial points X100. System marketplace fully unlocked. The blue screen flickered, shifting to an interface resembling an online shopping store, packed with categorized goods. Lin Shen immediately pulled up the survival supplies tab. 500 milliliters purified water. 1 point single pack field ration biscuits. 1 point box antibiotic painkillers. 5 points. The prices were shockingly cheap. His 100 starting points could buy 100 bottles of clean water, enough to sustain 100 lives out here in the wilderness. Yet he held off on purchasing supplies. The 48-hour death countdown loomed over him like a blade to the throat. A warm current washed through his body as the combat enhancement took effect. Lin Shen stretched his limbs, a satisfied realization settling in. This power boost is night and day. He then noticed a special tab on the marketplace interface labeled Rare Goods Zone. A countdown timer ticked below the empty tab. 5 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. The timer hit 0, and glowing text lit up the screen. Primary Shelter Bundle Blueprints plus Full Construction Materials. Contains complete core schematics and all building supplies required to erect a sturdy primary shelter. The only viable barrier against the coming extreme cold apocalypse. Price: 500 points purchase limit. One-time only countdown remaining. 47 hours, 55 minutes. Lin Shen stared fixedly at the line of text. 500 points. He glanced at the point balance displayed in the corner of his screen, 100. Closing the virtual interface, he glanced up at the murky gray sky. The sun peeked over broken skyscraper frames, and his internal work commute clock told him it was roughly 9 o'clock in the morning. The lethal cold would arrive at 9 o'clock the day after tomorrow. Without a shelter, death was guaranteed. He had to earn 400 more points. Lin Shen pulled up the system's point rules once more. Points settled automatically at 1,800 hours each evening. Years spent poring over messy quarterly reports had sharpened his data analysis instincts, a skill that might just keep him alive now. Current time: Day 1, 9 a.m. cold apocalypse arrival. Day 3, 9 a.m. That meant he only had 2-point settlement cycles before disaster struck. Lin Shen glanced at the top left corner of his interface. Current shelter population: 1. The system counted him as one official member by default. If he chose to survive alone, with no recruits, 100 points at today's 1,800 hours settlement, another 100 tomorrow evening, plus his initial 100 points. When the cold hit, he would only have 300 points, far too little to buy the shelter bundle. He would die. He had to recruit other survivors. Lin Shen's mind raced through the math. If he recruited one more living person before 6 o'clock that evening, his population count would rise to 2. Today's settlement would grant 200 points, tomorrow's another 200, combined with his starting 100 points for a perfect total of 500 points. This meant he could not spend a single point for the next 2 days. No water, no food, no supplies. This plan carried zero room for error. Surviving 48 hours without food or water while trekking across the wasteland would drain all his strength, leaving him defenseless against any mutated creatures he encountered. Recruiting just one person is far too risky. Lin Shen's gaze hardened. If he gathered 2 or 3 survivors, his daily point income would multiply exponentially. He would not only afford the shelter bundle, but also stock up on water, rations, and weapons. In this hellish wasteland, every living human was a walking source of endless points. Lin Shen tightened his grip on the steel bar, ready to step out of the ruined convenience store. Tap, tap. A sharp, rhythmic tapping echoed through the silent abandoned street, jarring Lin Shen to a halt. He instantly ducked behind a fractured load-bearing pillar, both hands wrapped around his metal rod, slowing his breathing to a near stop. The sound struck against asphalt in sharp, regular clicks. High heels. Lin Shen narrowed his eyes. No wasteland monster would wear formal footwear. This had to be another human transported from Earth alongside him. Is anyone there? A trembling female voice drifted out from the alley, edged with the familiar authoritative sharpness she'd carried every day at the office, even as fear shook her tone. Lin Shen leaned against the concrete pillar, barely holding back a bitter laugh. He knew that voice all too well. For 2 years, it had hounded him daily, sharp, condescending, and endlessly domineering. Su. Out of 1 billion humans scattered randomly across this planet, they had landed within walking distance of each other. It felt like cruel fate. Lin Shen stayed hidden, watching the alley mouth coolly. Crunching rubble echoed as Su stumbled into view. Gone was her polished executive aura. Her crisp white blouse was smudged with gray dust, and a tear ran along her tights. She twisted her ankle mid-step, wincing in pain as she leaned heavily against a rusted abandoned car, trembling from head to toe. Is anyone out there? Help me. Only the wind swirling through dead weeds answered her plea. Lin Shen pushed off the pillar, shifting the rusted steel bar in his hand, his leather shoes crunching over broken rubble as he stepped out of the shadows. Su's head shot up, wide with fright. The second she recognized his face, despair melted away, replaced by overwhelming relief. Spotting a familiar face in this desolate ruin was her last lifeline. Lin Shen. Su pushed off the car, scrambling forward. Her stiletto heel snapped clean off with a sharp crack, leaving her limping as she stumbled toward him, streaked makeup smearing across her tear-streaked face. Lin Shen, save me. Get me out of this terrible place. Lin Shen stood rooted to the spot, one hand dragging the rusted steel rod so its tip touched the ground, staring at her without a shred of warmth. Su lurched forward, reaching out to grab the front of his shirt. Lin Shen stepped sideways, dodging her grasp. She froze mid-motion, staring up to meet his eyes. There was none of the deference he'd always shown his superior at work, none of his usual meek compliance. His gaze sized her up coldly. as if evaluating a valuable resource. A shiver ran down Susu's spine. Yet years of holding a position of authority clung to her, and she raised her voice to mask her panic. Why are you avoiding me? Help me up at once. Where even are we? We need to get back to the office and call the police. Her voice wavered, hollow bravado masking raw terror. Lin Shen brushed dust off his steel bar, pulling up his system interface. Recruitment condition. Target must provide voluntary, clear verbal consent to join the shelter. Submission. Lin Shen took a step forward, towering over her. It's 9 in the morning, and temperatures are already dropping. He said flatly, no emotion in his tone. There is no drinking water, no food anywhere. Susu shrank backward, her face draining pale. Look around you. Lin Shen gestured toward the distant ruined skyline with the metal rod. No film crew, no police. There isn't even a rat left to scavenge for scraps. What do you want from me? Susu bit down on her pale lips. Alone like this, you won't survive the night. Susu's arrogance shattered completely. At the office, her power came from company rules and performance penalties. Out here, all those rules meant nothing. The rusted steel rod gripped in Lin Shen's hands was the only law that mattered. Then, take me with you, she begged, all sharpness gone from her tone. I'll agree to anything, just get me back. Face reality. We can never return. Lin Shen cut her off without mercy. He slammed the end of the steel rod against the pavement with a heavy thud. You have a choice. Join my group and follow all my orders. Susu stared at him in stunned disbelief. A top overseas educated manager, forced to submit to the low-level subordinate she'd berated every single day? A cold gust of wind cut through her torn tights, making her teeth chatter. She glanced around the eerie, empty ruins, then back at Lin Shen's unfeeling stare. The primal urge to survive crushed all her pride. I agree. Lin Shen glanced at his system panel. No notification popped up. The system judged her vague statement insufficient as clear voluntary consent. Say it again, Lin Shen ordered coldly, reciting the exact required line. Speak every word clearly. I voluntarily joined Lin Shen's shelter. Susu's jaw dropped, thinking the demand absurd beyond belief. Why insist on such a dramatic oath in the end of the world? Lin Shen grew tired of waiting and turned to walk away. A defenseless, sheltered woman left alone amid the rubble was as good as handed a death sentence. Watching Lin Shen truly prepare to abandon her, Susu completely lost her composure. She scrambled forward on all fours, throwing her arms tight around his thigh, casting aside her ridiculous corporate dignity along with her broken heels into the mucky mud. I volunteer to join your shelter, Lin Shen. I swear it. Please, don't leave me behind. The moment her tear-choked vow left her lips, a pleasant system chime echoed inside Lin Shen's head. Ding. Eligible survivor has given clear consent. Susu has officially joined the shelter. Lin Shen glanced at the top left corner of his glowing blue holographic screen. Current shelter population, 2. Perfect. This was a massive gain. Lin Shen lifted an eyebrow, thoroughly pleased. The system's registration was complete. The high and dry former department manager was now fully under his charge. If he survived until 6 o'clock that evening, 200 points would be credited to his account on time. Combined with his starting 100 points, he was only a small step away from the 500 points needed for the basic shelter blueprint. Susu collapsed onto the ground, overcome with relief at escaping death. She had no idea that in Lin Shen's eyes, she was nothing more than a living point generator. Naively, she thought Lin Shen had spared her out of lingering old workplace goodwill. Lin Shen slung a rusted threaded steel rebar over one shoulder and looked down at her. Welcome on board, Manager Su, he drawled with mockery. Out here, your survival KPIs fall entirely under my authority. All the resentment he'd bottled up as a subordinate washed right back over her. Back at the office, Susu had hounded everyone relentlessly with performance metrics. But out on this wasteland, those meaningless corporate rules had crumbled to dust, leaving only raw power and the brutal laws of survival. Coated in ash, Susu's eyes burned red. Those sharp, judgmental eyes that had once looked down on everyone now welled with tears. Her lips clamped shut as she simmered with powerless rage. Seeing the once untouchable superior reduced to such a pitiful state filled Lin Shen with quiet satisfaction. Yet emotion was the most worthless currency in the wasteland. Lin Shen's mind raced. This woman was his steady source of daily points, guaranteed 100 each day. If she died before the daily settlement, his entire shelter plan would collapse. He had to keep her alive. Lin Shen's gaze drifted to her injured lower legs. Her tight office skirt was torn wide open, her thin stockings sliced to shreds by shards of broken glass, exposing scraped skin. Against the gray, desolate ruins, her vulnerable legs stood out painfully. Sensing Lin Chen's unwavering stare, Su instinctively crossed her arms and shrank backward, eyes sharp with wariness. "Quit playing the victim," Lin Chen scoffed, unsparing in his criticism. "Those shattered heels you're wearing won't let you outrun a single mutated beast. Don't come crying to me if you get torn apart." Su froze on the spot, heat flooding her cheeks. She'd thought Lin Chen was leering at her appearance, but it turned out he only saw her as a burdensome liability. The slight stung deeply. Lin Chen paid her no more mind and turned away. This newly recruited point source could not die under any circumstances. First priority, find her sturdy footwear capable of running. If he could scavenge extra supplies along the way, or even recruit another living survivor, his odds of survival would skyrocket. "Get up and follow me," Lin Chen ordered, gesturing toward the rubble ahead with his rebar. Su dared not talk back. She pushed herself shakily off the ground, but the instant her right foot bore weight, a searing pain shot up her swollen ankle, puffed up like a steamed bun. "Ah!" she yelped, dropping back onto the dirt, tears streaming down her face. "Lin Chen, my ankle hurts too badly to walk." Su looked up at him, slipping into her coddling tone. "Could you carry me?" Lin Chen didn't even glance over his shoulder. "The wasteland doesn't feed idle hands. If you want to live, stand on your own 2 feet. Stay here, and the monsters will have you for dinner." With that cold dismissal, Lin Chen strode toward a rusted abandoned sedan. He raised his rebar and smashed the cracked window with a thunderous bang, rummaging quickly through the interior for usable supplies. Seeing Lin Chen show zero inclination to treat her gently, every delusion Su clung to faded away completely. "I'll walk. I'll keep up." Terrified, she scrambled upright, dragging her damaged foot forward through gritted teeth. Lin Chen scanned the landscape through swirling dust, locking onto a massive abandoned department store at the end of the street. The grimy signboard still faintly read Times Department Store. "We're heading there. Find a sports goods shop inside." The path to the mall was littered with wreckage. Cracked asphalt was piled high with rusted metal frames and jagged stone debris. Su limped along, every step pure agony, her ankle raw and bleeding within minutes. Lin Chen led the way ahead, moving swiftly without pausing to help her. He gripped his steel rebar in one hand, his eyes sweeping the surrounding ruins like a radar, alert for mutated creatures that could lunge out at any moment. At the same time, he silently gauged Su's breaking point. In this godforsaken wasteland, those who could not pull their own weight wasted precious oxygen simply breathing. A journey that should have taken 10 minutes dragged on as Su sweated through her clothes. While stepping over a broken concrete pipe, her foot slipped, and she crashed heavily into a pile of sharp gravel. A huge patch of skin flayed off her palm, and her knee split open, oozing fresh blood. Agony overwhelmed her, and she let out a sharp cry. Collapsed on the ground, she stared hopeless at his back, tears smearing ash across her face. She truly could not take another step. Lin Chen's footsteps halted. He turned to stare at Su crumpled in the dirt, clicking his tongue with extreme irritation. Still, he did not walk off, instead pacing back to stand over her. He made no move to offer a hand, only shoving his mud-caked steel rebar into her line of sight. "Grab hold of it, and stop slowing us down." His voice was hard and unyielding. "A brutal deep freeze will descend in 48 hours. If you don't move, you'll freeze solid out here." Su stared at the cold metal rod thrust before her. That rough rebar was her only lifeline now. Shame at surrendering tangled with relief that she was not alone. She bit her lip, reached out, and clutched tightly to one end of the rebar. Lin Chen tensed his arm and hauled upward hard. Su stumbled unsteadily back onto her feet with the momentum. Though they were only connected by a simple steel rod, her racing heart finally settled, knowing she was not abandoned in the endless wasteland. The pair trudged onward until they reached the entrance of Times Department Store. The glass front doors had shattered into nothing but shards. Darkness swallowed the shop interior, sunlight barely illuminating the threshold. A thick, choking stench of mold and rot washed over them the second they stepped close. Lin Chen held up a hand sharply, signaling Su to stay quiet. She clamped a palm over her mouth instantly, not daring to draw even a loud breath. Gripping the rebar firmly, Lin Chen lightened his footsteps and crossed the broken glass into the unknown blackness. Su stuck to his back like glue, not daring to drift an inch away. The first floor's former luxury jewelry and cosmetics counters were reduced to smashed rubble, unrecognizable trash strewn everywhere. Lin Chen adjusted to the dim light, squinting through the wreckage to hunt for a floor directory, eager to locate the sports shop and secure footwear as soon as possible. As they crept silently across the mall's central atrium, thud, thud, faint, slow banging echoed from deep within the dark building. Every muscle in Lin Chen's body coiled tight. He froze in place, rebar raised like a predator locking onto prey, gaze fixed firmly on the source of the noise. Su's legs buckled with terror. She clutched his shirt, shaking like a leaf. "Help, please." A hoarse, weak cry drifted out after the banging. It was no monster's snarl. A living human. The faint plea carried through the dark ruins. Lin Chen did not rush forward. Instead, he grabbed Su by the collar, yanking her roughly down behind a collapsed load-bearing pillar. Su's knee slammed against sharp stone, and she opened her mouth to scream from the pain. Lin Chen spun around, icy eyes boring straight into her face. Su swallowed the cry building in her throat instantly, pressing both hands tight over her mouth, trembling with fear and agony. Lin Chen refocused his attention ahead. Both hands wrapped around his rusted rebar, he crouched low and edged forward along broken walls, carefully avoiding loose glass and rubble with every step. They crept slowly to the edge of the second-floor atrium. Dim light filtered through cracks in the shattered glass dome overhead. Lin Chen peeked half his head out to scan the wreckage ahead. His pupils narrowed sharply. Lying before the entrance of an abandoned sports brand shop was a mutated rat the size of an adult medium-sized dog. Its body was covered in rigid black barbs. Jagged fangs jutted from its jaws, and thick, foul saliva dripped from its maw. A fire axe with peeling red paint was buried deep in its skull. Black blood mixed with gray brain matter pooled across the floor, reeking of rot. Past the corpse of the mutated rat, propped against a load-bearing pillar several meters away, sat a burly man. With a buzz cut, his face was caked in blood, his chest heaving rapidly. A deep, gaping laceration tore through his right thigh. Flesh split wide open as fresh blood gushed nonstop, staining the concrete beneath him crimson. He had just survived a brutal life-or-death fight and won. Su peeked out from behind Lin Chen's back. The sight of the horrifying giant rat shattered her remaining mental resolve. Her legs slipped, and her heel scraped against a piece of broken glass. Click! The sharp sound echoed deafeningly through the silent mall. The instant the noise rang out, the burly man against the wall snapped his eyes open. Though gravely wounded, his reflexes remained razor-sharp. He pulled a shard of bloodied broken glass tucked in his waistband, gripping it tightly as he fixed his stare on Lin Chen's hiding spot. Filled with fierce hostility. "Who's there?" the man rasped, voice hoarse. Lin Chen took a deep breath and stepped out from the shadows. He kept his rebar relaxed at his side, maintaining a 5-meter safe distance and refusing to move closer. "I'm from Earth, newly transported here. We mean no harm," Lin Chen said evenly. When the man laid eyes on Lin Chen and the terrified Su beside him, the wariness in his gaze softened slightly. His rigid shoulders sagged, and he erupted into a violent coughing fit, spraying frothy blood from his mouth. "Don't come any closer." The man forced a bitter smile, voice weakening. "I don't have long left. I don't know if this beast's bite carries poison. I'd rather not mutate after death and put you two in danger." He leaned back against the wall, gasping for air. His name was Zhang Feng, a retired reconnaissance soldier turned survival instructor. Zhang Feng struggled to lift a hand, digging deep into the blood-soaked pocket of his windbreaker. After fumbling for a moment, he pulled out 2 crumpled energy bars and half a bottle of water. He tossed the supplies toward Lin Chen's feet. "I had rotten luck landing here. Ran straight into this monster." Zhang Feng spoke with unflinching honesty. "The water and food are yours." He paused, locking eyes directly with Lin Chen. "Brother, do me one favor. Give me a quick, clean end. I refuse to turn into one of those beasts." In this lawless wasteland, food and water meant survival itself. Instead of hoarding his precious supplies, Zhang Feng offered them freely, only begging to retain his humanity in death. Su's eyes lit up the second she spotted the energy bars and half-empty water bottle. She quickly tugged at Lin Chen's sleeve, lowering her voice in urgent panic. "Lin Chen, grab the supplies and leave at once. He's bleeding everywhere. The scent will draw more monsters soon. There's nothing we can do for him." Lin Chen turned to look at Su, her face twisted with greed and fear. He swatted her hand away hard. Su flinched from the pain, stepping back half a pace, utterly stunned. "Fool," Lin Chen's eyes turned cold, his words cutting deep. "Open your eyes and look at that dead mutated rat. Monster beasts are already roaming these ruins. Do you truly think the two of us, with no combat skill between us, can survive tomorrow with only that half bottle of water?" Su paled, unable to utter a single retort. Lin Shen ignored her, redirecting his full attention to Zhang Feng on the ground. His mind ran rapid calculations. If he stabilized Zhang Feng's injuries, shelter population would rise to 3. At 6 o'clock that evening, the system would distribute 300 points. Another 300 would arrive at 6 the next night. Combined with his starting 100 points from the new arrival package, he would hold 700 points total before the deep freeze hit. The basic shelter blueprint cost 500 points. After purchasing it, he would still have 200 points left over. Inside the system shop, a box of antibiotic pills cost merely 5 points, and a roll of sterile medical bandages cost 2. The cost to treat Zhang Feng was negligible. In exchange, he would gain a bodyguard capable of slaying mutated beasts single-handedly. This investment would pay off tenfold. More importantly, Zhang Feng's willingness to sacrifice himself rather than endanger strangers spoke volumes about his moral code. Betrayal was commonplace. A powerful, principled veteran was ideal. Lin Shen tightened his grip on the rebar and stepped forward 1 pace. He looked down at Zhang Feng from above, tone unnegotiable. "I don't want your last words." Zhang Feng blinked in surprise. "I can stop your bleeding and keep you alive, stop you from mutating," Lin Shen said calmly, yet with unshakable authority. "But there's one condition." A flicker of desperate hope ignited in Zhang Feng's dull eyes. "What's your condition?" Lin Shen leaned down slightly, lowering his voice to a murmur. "Swear your loyalty to me. Obey every order without question, and join my group." Zhang Feng stared hard at Lin Shen, searching his cheap, white shirt for a joke. There was none, only unwavering calm and self-assurance. Zhang Feng bared his blood-stained teeth in a rough smile. "If you truly have a way to save me, I swear to join your shelter." He shouted the vow with every last ounce of his fading strength. The second the words left his mouth, ding. A crisp system alert blared inside Lin Shen's mind. Ding. Eligible survivor has given clear consent. Zhang Feng has officially joined the shelter. Lin Shen glanced at the holographic text in his vision. Current shelter population, 3. Now everything was secure. The second-floor atrium of Time's department store reeked of mingled blood and mold, the stench enough to churn anyone's stomach. Lin Shen glanced at Zhang Feng leaning weakly against the wall, then walked dozens of meters away behind a collapsed load-bearing pillar, out of sight of the other 2. Once hidden, he pulled up his system interface without delay. Purchase. 1 box of antibiotic pills 5 points, 2 rolls of bandages 2 points, 1 bottle of disinfectant 1 point. Remaining, 92. Soft white light flickered, and brand new medical supplies materialized out of thin air. He walked back and tossed the bandages and disinfectant at Su Su's feet. "Get to work, dress is wound." Lin Shen's voice held no inflection. Su Su glanced at the bloodied glass shards, then at the gaping gash on Zhang Feng's thigh, her face turning ashen. She shrank backward instinctively, forehead creased tight, her pampered office attitude flaring up again. "I can't stand the sight of blood. I don't know how." Su Su crossed her arms. "And he's covered in dirt and blood. What if there's some unknown infectious pathogen on him?" Lin Shen did not even bother growing angry. He stepped forward, towering over her. "Su Su, have you still not woken up to reality?" Lin Shen's words cut like a blade. "This is not your CBD office, and I am no longer your low-level subordinate. Inside my group, I provide shelter, and every one of you must contribute value in return." He nodded toward Zhang Feng on the ground. "He can hunt mutated beasts and stand guard as protection. What can you do, besides scream and rely on others to save you?" Su Su trembled violently under his scathing judgment, eyes burning with tears, overwhelmed by crushing humiliation. "The wasteland does not feed idle hands." Lin Shen gestured at the medical supplies on the ground. "Either pick those up and stop his bleeding, proving you hold some use to this group, or walk out of the mall right now and bargain with the mutated rats outside about your precious corporate pride." The atmosphere plummeted to freezing cold. Meeting Lin Shen's emotionless gaze, Su Su completely broke down. She finally understood that clinging to vanity would only get her killed out here. Raw survival instinct crushed every shred of petty pride she held onto. She knelt shakily, grabbed the iodine and bandages, and shuffled over to Zhang Feng's side. "Brace yourself, this will sting." Su Su turned her head away so she would not have to watch, pouring the iodine straight onto the open wound. Zhang Feng's facial muscles seized in agony, veins bulging across his forehead, yet he bit down hard and did not utter a single whimper. Su Su fumbled clumsily wrapping the bandages around the wound, her messy work resembling a mummy's wrappings, but the bleeding finally halted. She pried 2 antibiotic pills out of the box and held them to Zhang Feng's lips. A faint hint of color returned to his deathly pale cheeks. He looked at Su Su's blood-streaked hands and tear-streaked eyes, nodding heavily. Thanks, miss. Zhang Feng's voice remained hoarse, steady with the toughness of a veteran soldier. Su Su froze in place. In this cruel wasteland, that simple word of thanks unexpectedly settled her frayed nerves. She wiped the blood messily off her palms, mumbling quietly, "You should thank him instead." Sunlight streamed through the broken glass dome overhead. It was already midday. A loud rumble echoed from Su Su's empty stomach, breaking the quiet. She clutched her abdomen, face flushing bright red with embarrassment. She hadn't drunk a single drop of water since the airdrop, her stamina completely drained. Zhang Feng said nothing, yet his cracked, peeling lips told everyone he was also hitting his physical limit. "Stay put. I'll find something to eat." Lin Chun grabbed a steel rebar and ducked into a dim, abandoned shop beside them. Once out of sight, he opened the system store without hesitation. Purchase 3 bottles of 500 milliliters purified water, cost 3 points. Purchase 3 packs of individual field ration biscuits, cost 3 points. Purchase 1 high-energy chocolate bar, cost 2 points. Remaining points, 84. A few minutes later, Lin Chun walked out carrying a dusty, tattered plastic bag and tossed it casually between the 2 others. Lucky break. Found some unexpired supplies. 3 bottles of water, 3 packs of ration biscuits, plus a high-energy chocolate bar. Staring at the items on the ground, Zhang Feng's eyes went wide. As a veteran outdoor instructor, he knew better than anyone how improbable it was to find such clean, intact supplies in the wasteland. He shot Lin Chun a long, searching look, asked no unnecessary questions, and grabbed the water and biscuits to eat straight away. Su Su had long shed the poise of a senior manager. She tore open the packaging and chewed the dry biscuits ravenously, nearly choking, and quickly chugged 2 big gulps of water. The 3 huddled behind a load-bearing wall to eat quickly. "Zhang Feng, you're the expert out here." Lin Chun swallowed his last bite of rations and fixed his gaze on the burly man opposite him. "Tell me what's really going on in this godforsaken place." Zhang Feng twisted the water bottle cap shut, his face heavy with grimness. He gestured at the cracked support pillar and the vine-choked ruins outside. Judging by the weathering and overgrown vegetation, human civilization here collapsed a very long time ago. His voice dropped low as he laid out his deduction. "But that giant rat I split open earlier, its hide and bones were unnaturally dense. It couldn't have evolved naturally. It's more like a bioweapon spawned by some virus." He paused, sweeping his gaze over Lin Chun and Su Su. The system's warning about an extreme cold snap hitting in 48 hours won't just be a simple temperature drop. Paired with the mutant beast hordes, this is a mass extinction event. We have no safe shelter, no reliable fire source, and worst of all, no proper weapons. Zhang Feng tapped the jagged shard of glass at his waist. "With nothing but this broken glass and rusted steel rods, we're dead meat if 2 or more monsters come for us." Su Su shuddered violently, the small sense of safety the food had given her vanishing in an instant. She instinctively turned to Lin Chun. Lin Chun didn't even frown. Zhang Feng's assessment matched his own thoughts exactly. "I'll handle weapons and shelter." Lin Chun locked eyes with Zhang Feng, his tone carrying unshakable authority. "You 2 only need to remember one thing. Stick with me, and follow every order without hesitation. Food and clean water will never run short." In this lawless wasteland, the promise of full bellies was the most reassuring guarantee anyone could offer. Zhang Feng and Su Su exchanged a glance, both profoundly shaken. They had no idea what hidden cards Lin Chun held, but seeing the brand new packaging on the supplies, they chose to hold their tongues and follow his lead. Now fed and hydrated, their energy had partially recovered. Su Su pushed herself upright, stretching her swollen ankle. She glanced toward the abandoned sporting goods shop next to them. "Lin Chun, there might be supplies inside." She peeked in, a flicker of excitement in her voice. Lin Chun and Zhang Feng shared a silent look, grabbed their makeshift weapons, and followed her in. The shop was a wreck, most shelves collapsed. Thankfully, the back section was sheltered from wind and rain, and several metal storage cabinets in the far corner remained mostly intact. Zhang Feng stepped forward and wrenched the warped cabinet door open with brute force. Inside sat neatly stacked sets of sealed windproof hiking jackets, several pairs of trail running shoes underneath, and a handful of travel backpacks tucked to the side. They were covered in dust, but undeniably valuable gear. "Change into these." Lin Chun tossed a black set to Zhang Feng. "Your current clothes reek of blood. They'll draw every mutant within miles." Zhang Feng nodded, quickly stripped off his tattered outerwear, and slipped on the new jacket. Su Su rummaged in a corner and found a set of form-fitting black athletic wear and lightweight running shoes. She'd long since grown sick of her torn skirt and broken heels. Holding the new clothes to her chest, Her cheeks flushed faintly as she glanced awkwardly at the two men. I need to change. She bit her lip, her voice barely audible. Lin Chen slung a backpack he'd picked out over his shoulders, then raised an eyebrow at Su Su. Zhang Feng, stand guard at the entrance. With that, Lin Chen turned, gripping his steel rebar. Panic instantly erased her awkwardness as she watched them start to leave. She lunged forward and grabbed Lin Chen's sleeve tight. Don't go far. Her voice trembled with fear, every shadow making her jump. I'm scared. What if another giant rat jumps out? Lin Chen halted, staring at the woman who once commanded entire departments at their company, now clinging to him like a frightened bird. Zhang Feng also slung his chosen backpack over his shoulders, stifling a laugh and turning his head away. We'll stay right by the door. You have 3 minutes. Lin Chen pulled his sleeve free, his tone calm. No one's going to bother you while you change. Su Su let out a relieved huff, clutching her new clothes and darting behind the crumpled remains of a fitting room. The two men walked to the shop in trance, their backs to the store, scanning the open mall courtyard warily. The soft rustle of fabric came from behind them as Su Su changed. Zhang Feng leaned against the doorframe and lowered his voice. Lin, this mall's layout is a tangled mess. Should we set up camp here tonight? We're not staying. Lin Chen stared out at the shadow-strewn ruins. This place is exposed to the elements, way too noticeable. It won't shield us from the freezing cold or the beast swarms. Once we get proper weapons, we leave immediately. As he spoke, Lin Chen's gaze drifted casually over the row of abandoned shops on the second floor opposite them. The next second, his eyes froze in place. Crouched behind the broken storefront window of the outdoor expedition shop across the way was a pitch-black silhouette. It was no rat. Its shape vaguely resembled a human, but its limbs twisted backward at grotesque, unnatural angles, as if every joint had been snapped and bent the wrong way. Worst of all, 2 faint emerald glows burned where its head should be, locked straight onto their position. Zhang Feng. Lin Chen's knuckles whitened around his steel rebar, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. Something's wrong. Zhang Feng reacted instantly, tightening his grip on the glass shard. Across from us. Lin Chen didn't dare turn his head, keeping the target locked in his peripheral vision. What the hell is that thing? Zhang Feng followed his line of sight, his breath catching in his throat, every hair standing on end. Damn. He swallowed hard, a chill crawling over his scalp. That creature looks utterly unnatural. Lin Chen kept his eyes fixed on the backward twisted shadow in the second-floor window. The 2 eerie green glows cut through the dim ruins, triggering an instinctive surge of dread. He did not step back. Instead, adrenaline tensed every muscle in his body as he snapped a sharp warning toward the fitting room ruins. Hurry up. We've got trouble. In this cursed wasteland, facing an unknown mutant with only makeshift weapons was a death sentence. While the monster remained motionless behind the window, Lin Chen mentally pulled up his system panel and flicked to the store's weapons section without hesitation. A translucent virtual screen unfolded across his vision, lined with weapon options and their point costs. Fire axe, 3 points machete, 3 points recurve compound bow, 10 points. Lin Chen's eyes scanned the list rapidly. In this deadly wasteland, bladed melee weapons were the bare minimum for survival. But as he scrolled further down, his breath hitched. Beneath the melee weapons section lay firearm options. Glock 17 pistol 1 loaded magazine, 15 rounds, 20 points. A spark lit up Lin Chen's eyes. 20 points was a steep cost when he only had 84 left. Yet he knew better than anyone how low the odds were fighting this bizarre, dangerous mutant with blades alone. If it closed the distance, they'd all suffer critical injuries at minimum. Firearms were a game-changing advantage in the early wasteland. He was about to lock onto the pistol and complete the purchase when the shadow crouched in the far window vanished without a sound. Silence fell over the entire second floor. It's gone. Zhang Feng, already on high alert, roared out the warning. His grip crushed the glass shard hard enough to cut his palm, yet he felt no pain. Years of military training sent his muscles rigid, his eyes sweeping every dark corner like a radar. Lin Chen's heart hammered, yet his mind stayed razor-sharp, a strange rush of adrenaline coursing through him. Without a second thought, he rapidly tapped the system screen with his mind. Purchase. 2 fire axes, cost 6 points purchase. 1 machete, cost 3 points purchase. 1 Glock 17 pistol, cost 20 points total points spent, 29. Current remaining balance, 55. Ding. Purchase successful. Items stored in system inventory. At the pleasant system chime echoing in his head, Lin Chen sensed the heavy weight of metal fill his inventory space. He glanced down, drawing the Glock 17 and its spare magazine out into his hands. The cold, solid weight of the firearm settled in his palms, flooding him with a surge of security. He did not reveal the powerful weapon immediately, slipping it quietly into the inner pocket of his hiking jacket. In this lawless world, your deadliest trump card must stay hidden until the moment it's needed most. Next, Lin Shen pretended to rummage through the travel backpack he'd grabbed earlier. Beneath its cover, he hauled out two brand-new heavy fire axes with bright red frames and a sharp, weighty machete. Catch! Lin Shen tossed one axe backward without looking, his arm flexing with the throw. The axe sliced through the air. Zhang Feng tracked its trajectory instinctively, dropping the broken glass and catching the wooden handle firmly in his broad palms. The moment the weight settled, he stared at the gleaming, razor-sharp axe blade, his pupils blown wide. He shot a long, unspoken glance at Lin Shen's back, suppressing the storm of questions swirling in his mind. He kicked the useless glass shard aside, gripping the axe handle with both hands, a fierce killing intent blazing in his eyes. Perfect. With this, I'll split that monster clean in two today. Armed with a proper weapon, the veteran's fighting spirit surged to its peak. Lin Shen hefted the second fire axe, tucking the machete securely at his waist. He turned to call Su Su out, only to find her already stepping out from behind the collapsed fitting room ruins. She stood at the edge of the debris, now dressed in the form-fitting black athletic wear, the stretched fabric clinging neatly to her frame. All traces of earlier embarrassment had vanished, replaced by unbridled terror. Oddly enough, she paid no attention to Lin Shen or Zhang Feng. Her face drained of all color, eyes blown wide as she stared rigidly upward at the broken glass dome high above the mall courtyard. Lin Shen. Her voice shook so badly the words barely held together, her teeth chattering nonstop. She lifted a trembling hand to point toward the open ceiling, her tone thick with despair. Up there, it's above us. Lin Shen and Zhang Feng's nerves jolted. Both snapped their heads upward at once. Following Su Su's trembling finger, through thin streaks of gray light filtering through the shattered dome, they witnessed a sight that turned their blood cold. The twisted shadow they'd spotted in the window was no land-dwelling beast. It resembled a colossal mutant spider, its jagged, misshapen limbs clamped tight to rusted steel girders dozens of meters above the ground. Its joints bent at impossible, inhuman angles as it crawled upside down toward their position, moving without a single sound. The two emerald pinpricks of its eyes dragged sickly glowing trails through the dim air. Sensing the three prey staring up at it, a massive split tore open where its face should be, unleashing a shrill, piercing shriek. The next instant, the mutant's inverted limbs coiled and pushed hard. The rusted metal girders groaned under its weight. The enormous shadow launched itself from dozens of meters overhead, a wave of foul stench surging down as it plummeted straight toward the three people below like a cannonball. Spread out, Zhang Feng roared, throwing his burly body forward to shove the frozen Su Su clear of the impact zone. At the same time, he twisted his torso and swung the brand-new fire axe with all his strength, bringing it upward to meet the falling monster head-on. The axe's sharp edge cut a silver streak through the dimness. Veins bulged across Zhang Feng's arms as he twisted his hips, landing a brutal upward slash that connected dead-on with the mutant spider's front leg joint. Clang! The crash echoed through the rubble. The axe bit half a foot deep into the limb, bursting a sack of thick, dark green bodily fluid that splattered all over Zhang Feng's face. But the creature's weight was far heavier than he'd anticipated. The full force of its mass crashed down onto the axe blade, dragging Zhang Feng's boots two deep gouges across the concrete floor. The mutant let out a deafening screech, and another backward twisted hind leg whipped out like an iron baton, slamming hard into Zhang Feng's chest. The impact sent his body flying. He crashed through a row of abandoned shelves, skidding 4 or 5 meters across shards of broken glass before coming to a halt. His palms throbbed from the recoil, and the fire axe slipped from his grasp, clattering into the shadows. He lay flat on the ground, his ears ringing, a bitter metallic taste rising in his throat. The mutant spider crashed heavily onto the floor, sending stone fragments flying. It ignored the injured Zhang Feng entirely. Its two emerald compound eyes swiveled slowly, locking onto Su Su, who sat paralyzed on the ground less than 5 meters away. The creature's mouthparts worked back and forth, thick gray mucus dripping onto the tile, where it immediately bubbled and corroded the surface. Its thick, twisted front legs splayed wide, adopting a predatory stance. Fear completely short-circuited Su Su's mind. Stand up? Run? Every survival instinct dissolved under overwhelming terror. A broken, shrill scream tore from her throat, like a cat having its tail stepped on. The mutant spider pushed off with its hind legs, shattering the tile beneath it, and charged forward in a rush, carrying a wave of putrid stench, bearing down on Su like a heavy truck. Its two longest front limbs crossed, lunging straight for her neck. 3 meters. 2 meters. A figure burst out from behind a load-bearing pillar on the left. Lin Chen did not shout or roar, his face completely devoid of excess emotion. He spun the fire axe in both hands, choosing not to strike with the sharp blade. He flipped the weapon mid-swing, the flat, heavy back of the axe slamming hard into the mutant spider's hard outer shell as he sprinted forward. Basic physics took hold. Pure momentum transferred in a brutal blow. The monster's charging trajectory veered violently half a meter off course. Its massive body slammed into an abandoned display cabinet beside Su, sending mannequin limbs flying and choking the air with dust. Lin Chen's arms numbed from the impact, the fire axe nearly slipping out of his grip. Yet he did not retreat a single step. The creature's carapace was absurdly tough. The axe strike left nothing but a faint white scratch. Fighting this beast with melee weapons alone was suicide. A crunch of splintered wood echoed from the wreckage, and the mutant spider scrambled free in under 2 seconds, climbing back to its feet. This time, it ignored Su completely, all its rage fixed firmly on Lin Chen. 6 segmented legs scrabbled furiously over broken stone, its 2 front limbs raised high as it launched a dual stab straight at Lin Chen's chest, moving fast enough to blur its outline. Lin Chen hadn't recovered his momentum, his boots slipping on loose gravel. He had no way to dodge. It was an unavoidable blind spot. But he did not panic for a single second. Faced with the bony spears hurtling toward him, he moved against every natural instinct. He leaned forward instead of back, dropping his hips sharply, bending his upper body almost parallel to the ground. The 2 piercing limbs swept past his nose, missing by barely 3 centimeters, the rushing wind stinging his cheeks. Midway through this extreme backward lean, Lin Chen's right hand darted into the inner pocket of his hiking jacket. The moment his fingers wrapped around the cold pistol grip, his heartbeat steadied completely. Within 7 paces, speed belongs to the blade. Within 7 paces, the gun is faster and deadlier. He drew the Glock 17 in a fluid, lightning-quick motion. The black muzzle pressed directly into the mutant spider's gaping mouth, less than 20 centimeters separating them. Sharp, dense fangs loomed inches away, rank, slimy fluid splattering across the back of Lin Chen's hand. Lin Chen squeezed the trigger without hesitation. Bang, bang, bang. 3 gunshots rang out in rapid succession. At such close range, there was no chance the 9mm rounds would miss. Each bullet tore through soft oral tissue in sequence, obliterating the creature's central nervous system. The mutated spider's head burst open on the spot. Dark green bodily fluid mixed with brain matter sprayed everywhere, streaking the floor. The monster's massive body twitched twice, its 6 segmented limbs slowly curling inward. It then crumpled like a heap of rotting sludge, crashing heavily at Lin Chen's feet. The faint green glow in its compound eyes faded completely. A thin wisp of smoke curled upward from the muzzle, swirling slowly in the shafts of light filtering down. An oppressive silence blanketed the entire second floor. Zhang Feng hauled himself up from a pile of shattered glass, clutching his chest as he limped a couple steps forward. His face was caked in dried blood, yet his eyes bulged wide, fixed rigidly on the smoking pistol in Lin Chen's grip. In this wasteland, where even scrap metal was near impossible to scavenge, this young man had pulled out a brand new automatic handgun out of thin air. Zhang Feng's mind raced. As a veteran, he recognized the firearm instantly, a Glock 17, loaded to its full capacity of 17 rounds. 3 shots had just been fired, leaving 14 still chambered. This weapon could never have been picked up as random salvage. His thoughts drifted back to the pristine fire axe and supplies that had materialized out of nowhere earlier. All the pieces clicked into place, and the answer became obvious. Yet Zhang Feng asked nothing. He only shot Lin Chen a long, meaningful glance. Bending to retrieve his own fire axe, he cracked a grim smile. Looks like I've latched onto a real powerhouse for this ordeal. No prying questions, no probing suspicions. Such was the discipline forged by years of combat. Lin Chen turned and walked over to Su. She remained collapsed on the ground, propping herself up on trembling hands. A tear ran along the shoulder of her black tracksuit, revealing raw, scraped skin beneath the torn fabric. She stared up at Lin Chen, her lips drained of all color. Lin Chen stood over her, his gaze cold as frost. Scream one more time. and next time I'll break your legs and leave you here to distract the beasts. Susu jolted violently. She clamped both hands over her mouth, nodding frantically as hot tears spilled down her cheeks, not daring to make the faintest whimper. Her perspective of Lin Shun had shifted entirely. All the pride she'd held as a domineering office supervisor shattered into dust. One unshakable thought burned into her core now. The man she'd once mocked as a worthless nobody was her only shot at survival. Quiet. Zhang Feng cut through the hush abruptly, pressing an ear to a load-bearing pillar, his features twisting with alarm. Something's moving outside. Lin Shun focused his ears, listening intently. From the rubble-choked expanse beyond the mall, a dense rustling sound echoed forth. It was not merely one or two creatures. Countless beasts converged from every direction, surging forward like an incoming tide. The stench of blood leaking from the dead spider hung thick in the air, spreading outward. Those 3 gunshots, echoing across the lifeless wasteland, might as well have been a dinner bell broadcast for miles. Every mutated beast within several city blocks had heard the noise. A beast horde. Zhang Feng breathed the 2 words, his face draining of color. Lin Shun holstered his pistol without delay and hefted the fire axe once more. We retreat. The 3 fled through the sports store's rear exit, sprinting down the fire escape, and bursting out of the half-collapsed service doorway of Time's department store. Susu bit down hard on her jaw to keep pace, stumbling repeatedly, yet refusing to fall behind for a single second. They plunged into a narrow back alley winding behind the mall. Tangled vines and rusted overhead walkways blocked nearly all overhead light, while broken concrete and trash littered the ground, plunging the passage into near-total darkness. Behind them, from the direction of the department store, the first low, guttural howl split the air. A second, then a third followed in quick succession, blending into a deafening chorus. Lin Shun halted and glanced over his shoulder. By the faint light seeping through cracks in the collapsed dome, swarms of dark silhouettes charged relentlessly toward the mall. He turned his gaze back to the pitch-black stretch of alley ahead. At the edge of his vision, a system countdown ticked on relentlessly. Time remaining until extreme cold descends. 41 hours, 17 minutes. The wasteland back alley twisted like the bloated intestine of a dead serpent, narrow and pitch black. Collapsed residential buildings leaned crookedly against one another on either side, vines as thick as human arms sealing off every side passage. The 3 ran flat out through this fetid corridor. Behind them, the howls rising from the department store merged from scattered, isolated cries into an unbroken, roaring chorus. The cloying stench of rot and blood flooded down the alley, thick enough to churn the stomach. Zhang Feng ran second, clutching his wounded chest with every labored stride, his complexion ashen gray. Still, his footing stayed steady despite his injuries. The hardened frame of a soldier kept him upright when all else failed. Susu trailed silently at the rear. She gnawed her lower lip raw, her calves shaking uncontrollably. Yet her eyes never strayed from Lin Chen's back, unwilling to lose sight of him for even a heartbeat. After covering roughly 400 meters, they reached the alley's dead end. An overturned city bus wedged itself between 2 ruined buildings, its metal hull rusted a deep iron red. Chassis upturned, tires long reduced to crumbled black fragments. No way over. Zhang Feng skidded to a halt, quickly sizing up the bus's height and the walls flanking it. We can't climb over. Any detour would add at least 10 minutes to our route. He left the rest unspoken. There was no need to elaborate. The horde's howls, once distant echoes, now rumbled only 2 blocks away. 10 minutes would be more than enough time for the beasts to tear them apart twice over. Lin Chen said nothing. His eyes locked onto the gap beneath the bus's rusted chassis. A half-meter-tall crevice separated the metal frame from the ground, mostly concealed by overgrown vines. He rushed forward, swinging the fire axe 3 sharp times to hack through the tangled foliage. A dark vertical shaft lay exposed beneath. An abandoned subway ventilation shaft. A rusted metal ladder bolted to the inner walls descended into complete blackness. Lin Chen swung one leg over the shaft's edge and planted his foot on the first rung. The corroded metal screeched in protest, but held firm. He descended 3 more rungs rapidly, striking the ladder frame with the flat of his axe each step to test its stability. The dull thud confirmed it would bear their weight. Down you go. Susu first. I'll bring up the rear, he ordered Zhang Feng. Susu leaned over the shaft's rim to peer down, her pupils constricting at the sight of the endless black void resembling a sealed coffin. Another ferocious howl exploded far closer, no more than a single block away. She hesitated no longer, swinging herself over the edge to climb down. The ladder metal burned cold against her palms, loose rust flaking off to slice her skin. She gritted her teeth, descending rung by rung, her fingernails scraping raw against the corroded steel. On the 7th rung, her left foot slipped. Her body lurched downward, a wave of sickening weightlessness surging through her stomach. A single hand clamped tight around her wrist. The grip was powerful enough to ache down to her bones, yet steady as a vice. Lin Shun held her suspended with one arm, his other hand hooked firmly to the ladder rail, every muscle in his right arm bulging with strain. He did not glance at her face, nor offer any words of comfort. Plant your feet firmly. Susu's throat burned with suppressed sobs that she forced back. She found solid footing beneath her and wrapped both hands tight around the ladder frame. 2 fingernails split cleanly, sending stabbing pain shooting up her fingers, but she bit down hard enough to draw blood rather than make a sound. Zhang Feng climbed into the shaft last, yanking the hacked vines back over the opening to cover it as best he could. The 3 descended all the way to the bottom, their boots sinking into frigid standing water. The air hung damp and icy, thick with the overlapping reeks of rust and mold. Zhang Feng tapped the wall repeatedly with the handle of his fire axe, tilting his head to listen to the reverberations. Left, he whispered in a low hush. The hollow echo means it leads to the main platform hall. Lin Shen nodded and led the pair into the left passage. As they moved forward, he let his gaze drift downward, pulling up the system panel projected at the top left corner of his retinas. Current time: 1547. Time remaining until daily settlement: 1800 hours, 2 hours, 13 minutes. Current shelter occupants: 3 projected settlement points gained, plus 300 current point balance, 55 total points after settlement, 355 price of basic shelter blueprint, 500 points. He was 145 points short. If all 3 of them survived until the second settlement tomorrow at 1800 hours, another 300 points would be added. 355 plus 300 equaled 655. After purchasing the shelter blueprint, 155 points would remain, more than enough to buy their first batch of vital survival supplies. Points were secondary right now. The people beside him were what mattered most. Every survivor traveling with him was a walking source of steady settlement points. Lose 1 person, lose 100 points. Lin Shen dismissed the panel without breaking stride. At the passage's far end, a faint orange glow flickered into view. And voices. Zhang Feng shot a hand out to halt Lin Shen, pressing a single finger to his lips. The 3 pressed flat against the wall and crept silently to the corner, leaning out to observe. The subway platform hall stretched before them. Half its domed ceiling had collapsed, standing water pooling across the train tracks. 4 cracked load-bearing pillars barely propped up the remaining structure overhead. In the hall's center, a pile of splintered lumber burned in a crackling campfire, thin gray smoke curling upward. 4 figures lingered around the flames. A bald, burly brute with a broad, scarred frame gripped an iron pipe as thick as a man's forearm, perched atop an overturned shopping cart with legs splayed wide. Every line of his brutish face broadcast unchallenged dominance. To his left, a lanky, tall man leaned against a pillar, a rusted kitchen knife clutched in one hand, his eyes dark and suspicious. To his right, a scrawny youth squatted on the ground picking at his fingernails with a wooden stick, his gaze darting restlessly in every direction. The 3 had stacked shopping carts and salvaged scrap metal to build a crude barricade, blocking off the alternate passage leading back up to the surface. The 4th figure huddled alone in the corner, a thin, bespectacled man. With his wrists bound tight with electrical wire, bruises bloomed purple and blue across his face. His split lip crusted over with dried blood at his jawline. The bald brute strode over and drove a boot hard into the bespectacled man's ribs. Useless trash. I sent you out to find food, and you waste 2 hours coming back with an empty sack? A stray hound would serve me better than you. The bespectacled man let out a muted groan, curling inward without offering any retort. Lin Shen pulled his gaze away and leaned back against the wall. This was no cooperative band of survivors bound by shared hardship. It was a small gang that ruled through brute force, the bespectacled man nothing more than an unwilling captive forced to labor for them. Zhang Feng crept close, his mouth nearly touching Lin Shen's ear. No way to circle around them. None. Lin Shen breathed in an almost silent murmur. The ventilation shaft above us is far too narrow, and the beast horde is spreading across the surface. Retreating back up means certain death. The only other exit to ground level lies behind their barricade. Zhang Feng frowned, shooting Lin Shen a wordless glance that asked if they should charge through head-on. Lin Shen gave a slight shake of his head. He slung his fire axe over one shoulder and stepped out from around the corner. The sound of his boots sloshing through standing water drew every eye at the campfire instantly. The bald brute shot to his feet, leveling his iron pipe defensively. The lanky man and scrawny youth scattered quickly, spreading out to flank him from both sides. Lin Chen halted 5 meters away, firelight casting his face half in shadow. Just passing through. We need to use the passage behind your barrier. He nodded toward the blocked corridor. Move it aside, and we'll be on our way without trouble. The bald brute's gaze swept first over Lin Chen's fire axe, pristine, its cutting edge glinting sharp. Next he took in Lin Chen's well-fitted, clean tactical jacket and the bulging backpack slung over his shoulders. In these wasteland times, anyone with intact gear was prime prey. The bald brute split his lips in a leering grin, revealing yellowed, rotting teeth. Passage costs a toll, brother. He tapped the iron pipe against his palm. Set the axe down, hand over the pack, and you're free to go alone. Lin Chen's expression remained unchanged. That won't happen. The bald brute's grin froze for a split second before his voice boomed louder. Won't. Then turn around and crawl back the way you came. His sentence was cut short by a soft clatter echoing from deeper within the passage. An empty plastic bottle had rolled across the standing water. The lanky man and scrawny youth exchanged a quick look, then slipped forward one after another into the side passage. 30 seconds later, they emerged, herding Su Su and Zhang Feng between them. Zhang Feng still gripped his fire axe, but a rusted knife pressed against his lower back kept him from making any sudden moves. The scrawny youth dragged Su Su forward by the arm, shoving her roughly into the firelight. The moment the bald brute laid eyes on Su Su, his gaze locked firmly on her. Her fitted black tracksuit clung to her frame, her long legs covered by slim, athletic trousers. Even smudged with ash and grime, her features and figure stood out strikingly against the bleak surroundings. The bald brute ran his tongue over his cracked lips, a repulsive, greedy expression twisting his face. Hey now, you brought a woman along with you? He slammed the base of his iron pipe hard against the ground with a metallic clang, tilting his head to stare at Lin Chen. I've changed my terms. You can keep all your supplies and gear. Leave the woman here with us, and we'll all walk away satisfied. All warmth drained from Su Su's body, leaving her cold to the bone. Instinctively, she scrambled behind Lin Chen, fingers knotting tight in the fabric of his tactical jacket's rear hem. She did not scream, did not weep. Yet Lin Chen could feel her hands shaking violently against his back. Lin Chen did not turn to face her. He held the bald brute's stare unblinkingly, his tone calm. I'll give you one final chance. Let us pass, and we will not interfere with your group at all. The bald brute laughed at his unshaken composure. He advanced 2 paces, lifting a hand to shove Lin Chen square in the chest. Who do you think you are to make demands? From the corner, the bespectacled man suddenly spoke up, his voice hoarse and urgent. Stop fighting. The beast's tracks sent underground. Your campfire smoke and blood will draw every monster straight down here. The words hit like a bucket of ice water. The bald brute's outstretched hand froze midair, and the lanky man and scrawny youth paled instantly. Lin Chen's full attention locked onto the bespectacled man instead. Tracking scent, ability to follow prey into underground structures, smoke and blood accelerating their attraction. This man was not spouting baseless fear. He understood the behavioral patterns of mutated beasts, observations only someone with specialized knowledge could make. Lin Chen made his decision in an instant. Ignoring the bald brute entirely, he walked straight to the corner and knelt to meet the captive man's eyes level. What's your name? The bespectacled man stared back, stunned. I have supplies, weapons, and 2 capable fighters with me, Lin Chen said quietly, every word carrying weight. Extreme cold arrives in 41 hours. If you stay with these men, you won't survive the night. Come with me, and you'll live. The bespectacled man's pupils flared wide, his lips trembling uncontrollably. The bald brute finally processed what had just transpired. Lin Chen had poached his captive, right in front of him, on his own claimed territory. You're dead meat. The iron pipe whistled through the air, swinging hard toward the back of Lin Chen's skull. Lin Chen had anticipated the attack the moment he'd begun speaking to the captive. He twisted sharply at the waist, dodging the pipe's arc, and swept his fire axe horizontally, the flat of the head slamming dead center into the iron pipe's shaft. The metal pipe shuddered violently, tearing the skin of the bald brute's palms open, his fingers instantly going numb, barely able to maintain his grip. At the exact same second, Zhang Feng struck. He had waited for this signal. Despite his injuries, a surge of raw, desperate strength exploded through his frame. He lunged forward, swinging his fire axe overhead in a brutal downward chop, the sharp edge colliding with the back of the lanky man's rusted kitchen knife. The blade snapped clean in two, metal fragments flying through the air. Before the lanky man could react, Zhang Feng drove his knee hard into his midsection. The man folded in half and flew backward, crashing into the standing water and sending a half-meter wave splashing outward. 1 second passed. The scrawny youth spun to run. Zhang Feng hooked his ankle with one foot, executing a crisp trip that sent the youth sprawling flat onto the ground, the back of his skull cracking against the metal train tracks. He blacked out instantly. A second passed. Within 2 heartbeats, both of the bald brute's accomplices lay incapacitated. After missing his blow, the bald brute's torn palms left him barely able to hold the iron pipe. He stumbled backward to create distance, his boots slipping on the slick water beneath his feet. That single misstep gave Lin Shen the opening he needed to close the gap in an instant. He did not use the axe's sharp blade. The flat rear head crashed into the brute's wrist holding the pipe, a dull crunch of dislocated bones sounding before any cry could escape. The iron pipe slipped free, bouncing across the ground and vanishing into the dark. The bald brute opened his mouth to shout, but Lin Shen's left hand clamped tight around the nape of his neck, forcing his head downward. The 180-pound man crashed face first into the cold, standing water, muddy liquid slapping across his features. He struggled weakly, only to feel the axe's blade press lightly against the skin of his neck. Icy metal chilling him to the core, he froze, unable to move a muscle. Zhang Feng walked over with his fire axe, stomping down to snap the discarded iron pipe beneath his boot, then slammed the flat of his axe against the brute's shoulder to pin him flat against the wet ground. "Don't move," Zhang Feng panted, winded from the brief burst of combat. The bald brute lay face down in the mucky water, his whole body shaking like a terrified stray dog. Lin Shen approached and knelt beside him, the axe's edge still resting against the man's neck. That line about forcing the woman to stay behind. Lin Shen tilted his head slightly. "Say it again." I won't. Spare me, sir. I beg you." Muddy water filled the bald brute's mouth as he babbled, desperate tears mixing with the filth covering his face. The fight was not yet finished. The lanky man pushed himself upright from the puddle, having silently grabbed a jagged chunk of broken brick off the ground. He surged forward without warning, swinging the rock toward Lin Shen's skull. At the same time, the scrawny youth faked unconsciousness. The thin boy who'd laid motionless on the ground suddenly rolled upward, snatching the broken length of iron pipe from the dirt, roaring as he thrust the jagged metal toward Lin Shen's waist. Attacks closed in from 2 sides at once. Lin Shen did not turn around. His ears caught the distinct whistle of incoming strikes from both directions. He swung his fire axe backward in an upward arc, the flat head blocking the lanky man's brick mid-swing. Sparks flew as the stone shattered into shards. Without pause, he twisted the axe's handle, driving the blunt end straight into the lanky man's Adam's apple. The man crumpled to the ground, clutching his throat, gasping in ragged, wheezing breaths like a broken bellows. The scrawny youth's iron pipe had nearly made contact when Zhang Feng's fire axe descended between them. The flat face of Zhang Feng's axe slammed hard against the pipe, knocking the scrap metal clean out of the youth's grasp. Zhang Feng took a forward stride without hesitation, driving his elbow straight into the scrawny man's temple. The scrawny man's eyes rolled back, and he blacked out for real this time. From the moment the sneak attack began to both men collapsing, less than a handful of seconds had passed. The tall, thin man clutched his throat and curled up on the ground, his voice a hoarse, cracked rasp as he spat insults. "Cough, you're all dead meat. When the creatures outside break in, none of you will escape." Zhang Feng walked over with an empty expression and slammed the back of his fire axe against the back of the man's head. The blow was light, yet more than enough to silence him. The tall, thin man's rant cut off instantly, and he slumped limply into the puddled water. The burly bald man had watched the entire ordeal unfold. He shuddered, scrambled to his feet, snatched a broken iron pipe off the ground, and charged straight at Zhang Feng. He still retained his brute strength, throwing all his weight into the charge. The iron pipe swung horizontally, a desperate, lethal blow meant to kill. Zhang Feng did not dodge. He stepped forward half a pace, blocked the bald man's wrist with his left hand, and used the man's own momentum to yank him sideways, spinning his body off balance. The iron pipe struck nothing but empty air. The bald man's foot slipped in the standing water, throwing off his center of gravity. In that split opening, Zhang Feng's elbow shot forward like a bullet, slamming hard into the base of the man's neck. A crisp crunch echoed, bone fracturing. The 180-pound frame crashed heavily into the puddles, sending a huge spray of dirty water skyward. Zhang Feng planted a foot on the man's back and glanced down at him. The bald man went completely limp, not moving an inch again. Silence descended over the basement. Only the crackle of the campfire and the faint ripples settling back across the puddles broke the quiet. Su stood beside a load-bearing pillar, her hands twisted tight in the hem of her jacket until her knuckles blanched white. Her gaze was fixed on Lin Chen's back. Flame lights slanted across him from the side, stretching a long reflection across the stagnant water. A heartbeat earlier, when the tall, thin man had lunged for Lin Chen from behind, her heart had felt like it was being squeezed tight in a fist. It was not fear for her own safety. A ridiculous, unshakable thought had crashed unbidden into her mind. He couldn't get hurt. Her pulse hammered so hard it ached, and her eyes stung, threatening to flood with tears. Lin Chen retracted the fire axe and walked to the corner. He crouched down, pulled a machete from his waist, and sliced clean through the wire binding the bespectacled man's wrists. Your name? Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan rubbed the bloody indentations left by the wire on his wrists, lifted his head to stare at Lin Chen squatting before him, his lips trembling slightly. I'm a doctoral candidate at a research institute under the Chinese Academy of Sciences, majoring in bioengineering. He paused for a second, as if realizing academic titles meant nothing in this wasteland, then added, my research focuses on adaptive evolution of microorganisms in extreme environments. Lin Chen raised an eyebrow faintly. He quickly replayed everything Lu Yuan had said earlier. How mutant creatures tracked scents, smoke and blood amplified their attraction, and that the beasts could venture underground. None of it was meaningless begging. Every point held logical merit. This man possessed genuine expertise. Lin Chen stood, slid the machete back into his belt, and spoke plainly. Join my group, and I guarantee you'll survive the next 48 hours. Lu Yuan did not agree right away. He pushed his lopsided glasses back up the bridge of his nose, first glancing at the motionless bald man crumpled in the puddles, then at the unnaturally new fire axe gripped in Zhang Feng's hands. Finally his gaze returned to Lin Chen, lingering 3 full seconds on the young face before him. What makes you different? His tone held no provocation, merely calm, academic curiosity. The 3 men who captured me promised to keep me alive too, in exchange for me scavenging supplies for them. Lu Yuan held up his bruised wrists to show the wire scars. If I found nothing, I got beaten. Whatever I located, they took first pick. How can I trust your word is better than theirs? Zhang Feng's brows twitched, but he said nothing. Su, still by the pillar, almost spoke up to defend Lin Chen, but remembered his earlier warning that reckless outbursts would result in punishment, and clamped her mouth shut. Lin Chen did not rush to reply. Instead, he posed a counter-question. You claimed mutant beasts track scents into underground structures. What's your supporting evidence? Lu Yuan froze for a beat. The next instant, his eyes lit up, not from terror or flattery, but the sharp spark of a scholar encountering his field of expertise. I spent roughly 6 hours on the surface after teleporting here. Lu Yuan adjusted his glasses, his speech speeding up. I observed at least 3 packs of mutant rats. Their movement patterns are not random. They avoid open spaces, stick strictly to shaded building recesses, and follow clear chemotactic paths, advancing along gradients of scent concentration. He paused, confirming Lin Chen was listening, then continued. This behavioral pattern matches a parasitic blood nematode I once studied. Once the nematode invades a host's nervous system, it hijacks the creature's chemosensory receptors, forcing it to move toward the densest concentrations of blood scent. If these mutant beasts carry a similar parasitic mechanism, then gunshots and blood are a dinner bell for them. Lin Chen finished his sentence for him. Lu Yuan fell silent, staring at Lin Chen for 2 seconds. This young man understood his reasoning, not the hollow, agreeable pretense many offered, but genuine comprehension of the full logical chain, instantly distilling its practical survival value. Lin Chen cut off his train of thought before he could ponder further. The 3 men only wanted your labor, hands and legs to fetch goods. What I need isn't your physical strength. It's the knowledge locked in your head. Lin Chen's voice carried no warmth, as if negotiating a cold trade. The behavioral patterns, weaknesses, and habits of mutant creatures. This intelligence will be the line between life and death for all of us over the next 41 hours. He lowered his voice, delivering the final line firmly. In my group, your mind is your weapon. You supply information, I supply protection. A fair bargain. The campfire popped twice, and the bald man's reflection in the puddles remained unmoving. Lu Yuan stayed silent for 3 long seconds. He glanced down at his battered body and crusted blood on his wrists. Then he lifted his gaze, past Lin Chen's shoulder, to survey the rest of the party behind him. Zhang Feng, though clutching a chest injury, leaned against a pillar with the fire axe resting across his knees, his line of sight fixed vigilantly on the tunnel depths. Su stood quietly, calm and composed. No tears or hysterics to distract anyone. Each person held a clear, vital role. No one shoved or fought over supplies. No one was bound with wire. They were a world apart from the three worthless men laid out lifeless in the water. Lu Yuan stood and extended a hand. I'll join, but I have one condition. Lin Chen did not reach out yet, waiting for him to elaborate. If the information I provide saves the whole group, I demand equal rights to share all supplies. Lu Yuan's voice was rough, yet steady. Naturally, I'll pull my weight with every task the rest of you handle. Lin Chen grasped his hand. Deal. The moment their palms met, the familiar system chime echoed in his mind. Ding. Eligible survivor has formally agreed to join. Lu Yuan added to shelter member roster. Current official shelter members, 4. Lin Chen's gaze flicked to the number flickering in the corner of his retina. For people total. At 6 o'clock this evening, settlement rewards would trigger for 400 points. Adding his existing 55 points, he would hold 455 in total. Another settlement tomorrow would push the total to 855. The basic shelter blueprint cost 500 points. After purchasing it, 355 would remain, more than enough stockpile initial survival supplies. The numbers were trending upward, but that was all. The smoother the situation grew, the more cautious he needed to be. Lin Chen dismissed the system panel and released Lu Yuan's hand. Let's move. This place isn't safe to stay. The four evacuated the subway through a separate exit. It led to a partially collapsed escalator, its metal steps twisted into mangled spirals. The climb was arduous, yet the route stayed well concealed. When they climbed out to street level, the sky had faded to a murky gray. The pale dome light had dulled to leaden ash. It was roughly 5 in the afternoon, less than an hour before the 6 o'clock settlement tally. A stretch of abandoned residential buildings stretched out before them. Low-rise structures, 3 to 5 stories tall, packed tightly together, narrow gaps between buildings barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Vines and overgrown weeds swallowed most of the pavement, dried rat droppings scattered across broken stone. Yet there were no fresh tracks anywhere. It was far safer than the commercial district, at least for the moment. Zhang Feng leaned against a wall to catch his breath, scanning the surrounding terrain. He pointed to a 3-story building at the street corner, its outer walls clad in half-peeled white tile. A rusted metal sign hanging crookedly above the front door, the faded characters, Community Health Service Station, barely legible. That one. Windows under half a meter wide. Large mutant beasts can't squeeze through. Solid brick concrete construction, sturdier than glass and steel shopping malls. Only one main entrance. Barricaded, and we've got a sealed stronghold. The 3rd floor has a rooftop terrace for advance observation of all surrounding movement. He turned to Lin Chen. Best shelter within 200 meters for overnight rest. Lin Chen glanced the building over and made up his mind without hesitation. That's our spot. The 4 hurried inside the clinic. The second the door swung open, a bitter stench of mildew and aged medicinal chemicals washed over them. Thick dust coated the floor, leaving crisp footprints in their wake. Yet the walls remained intact with no ceiling cracks. The load-bearing structure solid and stable. Lin Chen assigned tasks on the spot. Zhang Feng, take Lu Yuan to barricade the 1st floor. Block every window and door with metal cabinets. Exam tables, waiting room chairs, stuff as much as you can into every opening. Su, head to the 2nd floor and clear out an examination room. We'll rest there tonight. Su parted her lips to speak, then closed them again, nodded, and headed upstairs. She gritted her teeth while hauling a metal medicine cabinet, its height nearly matching her own, yet far heavier than she anticipated. After several failed attempts to push it, she dropped to her knees and braced her shoulders against its side to heave. Zhang Feng caught a glimpse of her struggling as he passed the stairwell landing, paused briefly, then continued downstairs without a word. Lin Chen searched each floor alone. The pharmacy on the 1st floor had been ransacked completely, shattered glass cabinet doors littering the ground. Only unlabeled empty bottles left behind. But beneath a metal exam table in the 2nd floor treatment room, his boot kicked a sealed iron box. The lid had rusted shut tight. 2 sharp blows from the back of the fire axe popped it open. Inside sat 3 rolls of sterile gauze, their packaging fully intact. 2 bottles of iodophor with faded labels, the foil sealing caps unbroken, plus a stainless steel surgical scissors. Deep in another drawer, he found an old hand crank flashlight. Its casing was caked in rust, the crank stiff and stuck until he jiggled it free. After cranking it a dozen times, the bulb flickered to life, casting a dim yellow beam that still functioned well enough. Lin Chun grabbed the iodophore and gauze, carried them downstairs, and tossed them to Zhang Feng as he wedged waiting room chairs into a ground floor window frame. Zhang Feng caught the supplies one-handed. He stared at the iodophore bottle, its production date worn beyond recognition, and the gauze wrapped in aged packaging. These were scavenged relics from the wasteland, nothing like the brand-new fire axe Lin Chun had seemingly produced from nowhere. Zhang Feng fell silent for a beat. If Lin Chun truly possessed an unlimited supply of untouched modern goods, he would never waste time digging through ruined buildings for discarded medical scraps. The only logical conclusion, that mysterious supply source came with steep costs or strict limits. It was no endless treasure trove. The veteran mentally filed away another piece of the puzzle, yet only tore open the gauze wrapping, neatly bandaged his split palm, and flashed Lin Chun a lopsided grin. Thanks. Lin Chun climbed to the third floor alone. The rooftop terrace was small, ringed by waist-high concrete parapets, dead potted plants tilted against the walls, their soil baked into hard gray clods. He stepped over broken brick to the edge and swept his gaze across the landscape. The view stretched wide, nearly a kilometer of wreckage laid bare. Half-collapsed apartment blocks, twisted utility poles, crossroads choked by overgrown vines, all fading gray beneath the dome's hazy glow. In the distance, around the Times department store, scattered dark shapes darted between buildings, like sharks gliding through submerged reefs. Remnants of the beast horde still lingered in that zone, refusing to disperse. Lin Chun scanned every direction methodically. East, silent, empty ruins. Southeast, a half-collapsed pedestrian overpass blocked all line of sight. West, a stretch of shantytown ruins, vines plugging every crack and crevice. His gaze locked on due north, and he froze. 800 meters away, a gray 4- to 5-story abandoned building stood wedged between two taller skeletal high-rises. A flicker of warm orange light flashed once in a second-floor window. Then again, it was no glass reflection. Reflections shone cold and white. This warm glow flickered on and off. Fire. Other survivors. Lin Chun's fingers tapped absently against the concrete parapet, a steady, repetitive rhythm. Two separate calculations raced through his mind at once. First, the potential gain. 800 meters out, a full sprint would take 7 to 8 minutes. If he could bring these unknown survivors into the shelter roster before the 6 o'clock settlement tally, the group count would jump to 5, awarding 500 points in one lump sum, enough to buy the basic shelter blueprint immediately, shaving an entire day off his timeline. What difference could a single day make? Extra stockpiles of food, an extra layer of defensive fortifications, an additional 24 hours for Zhang Feng's injuries to heal. When the brutal extreme cold descended, those 24 hours would separate survival from death. His tapping grew faster against the concrete. Second, the risks. It was barely past 5 in the afternoon, and the dome's light dimmed by the minute. The dark shapes he'd spotted across the rooftop had multiplied noticeably in the past half hour. Mutant beasts grew far more active as light faded. The darker it became, the more aggressive they turned. The route from the clinic to that building crossed at least 3 exposed open streets, wide open ground with zero cover or shelter. If he left, what would remain to defend the clinic? Zhang Feng fought with a fractured rib injury. Su Su had no combat capability whatsoever. Lu Yuan possessed minimal fighting skill compared to even her. The ground floor barricades were only half finished, many windows still uncovered. If he got trapped by mutant beasts halfway there, or reached the building only to find hostile, uncooperative strangers, the half-fortified clinic could be breached in his absence, costing 3 lives and wiping out all future settlement rewards entirely. He weighed every angle. Lin Chun pulled his gaze away from the distant flickering flame and turned to head downstairs, his steps steady and unhurried. He could search for the other survivors tomorrow. If he died out there, all hope was lost. When he returned to the first floor, Zhang Feng had finished treating his chest abrasions with the expired iodophore. He'd uncapped the bottle first and sniffed its contents to confirm it hadn't gone rancid before pouring the antiseptic straight over his split skin. The veteran's pain tolerance was extraordinary. The stinging iodophore seeping into raw flesh did not earn so much as a frown, his hands wrapping gauze with the steady precision of a soldier binding field wounds. Lin Chun glanced at the rise and fall of his ribcage. Cracked ribs. A couple hairline fractures, no displacement. Zhang Feng patted the bandaged area and grinned. I fractured 3 ribs during jungle training once, wrapped them tight with bandages, and finished an 18-kilometer cross-country run. This injury's nothing. Lin Chun did not reply. Untreated rib fractures would worsen with movement, yet without splints or chest binders available, Compression gauze was their only makeshift solution. Zhang Feng understood the stakes better than anyone. Lu Yuan's voice cut through the quiet from the corner. Based on roughly 6 hours of surface observation today, plus the scavenging runs those 3 men forced me to undertake after capturing me, I've preliminarily categorized the mutant creatures in this zone into 3 distinct groups. Lu Yuan sat cross-legged against the wall, his back ramrod straight, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose with his index finger as he spoke. His formal lecture tone felt jarringly out of place amid the dust and dried blood of the abandoned clinic, yet no one present found it odd. First, mutant rat swarms. He held up one finger. The most numerous variant, ranging 30 to 50 centimeters in length. Single rats pose minimal threat, yet they live in massive colonies. Packs of a dozen to 40 individuals. Their chemotactic instincts are pronounced. They travel along shadowed surfaces and scent gradients, only turning aggressive when triggered by external stimuli. Zhang Feng leaned against an exam table, his gaze sharpening. This aligned perfectly with everything he'd witnessed roaming the ruins. Second, the large arthropod mutants you encountered at the shopping mall. He raised a second finger. They can scale vertical surfaces and possess extremely tough exoskeletons. Their numbers are scarce, yet a single one can slaughter an unarmed small group single-handedly. He paused, glancing toward Lin Shen. Your 3 shots targeting their oral cavities to destroy the central nervous system are the most efficient kill strategy one can theorize against these shelled creatures. Lin Shen ignored the compliment. What's the third category? Lu Yuan's voice dropped lower. I haven't seen one with my own eyes. He pushed his glasses up, his speech slowing half a beat. But while I was forced to search the ground under escort by those 3 people, I heard sounds coming from high up twice. The frequency was low, roughly 20 hertz, near the lower limit of human hearing. It wasn't wind, nor the creak of building structures releasing stress. He paused for 2 seconds. It had a steady, rhythmic pattern. Silence fell over the clinic for a split second. If it's flying mutated beasts, Lu Yuan swept his gaze across every face in the room. Then the danger rating for all open-air areas has to be raised. He added one last line. That includes the rooftop. The words landed, and Zhang Feng instinctively glanced up at the ceiling overhead. It was solid concrete, free of cracks, thick enough to hold. He looked back down, but Lin Shen noticed his right hand had drifted soundlessly to rest its fingers around the handle of the fire axe at his side. A veteran's muscle memory never lied. Rooftop observation shifts will continue as scheduled, but no prolonged stays after dark. Lin Shen made the call outright. One sweep every hour during the day, no more than 3 minutes each time. Lu Yuan nodded in agreement. Zhang Feng said nothing, tapping the axe handle lightly twice with his fingers. It counted as consent. Lin Shen turned and headed up to the 2nd floor. Su was still in the clinic room. She'd wiped all the dust off the metal medical bed by the window, then dragged 2 cotton mats over from the adjacent room. 2 of her fingernails had split clean down the middle. Her palms were rubbed raw and bright red. A small patch of skin on the knuckle of her middle finger had scraped open, tiny beads of blood slowly seeping out. She sat by the window, staring down at her hands. That morning, before the transport incident, these hands had just gotten a manicure. Every nail was coated in a delicate dusty rose shade. She'd sat in the leather swivel chair in her corner office on the 23rd floor, legs crossed, tapping the desktop in steady rhythm with her index finger as she reviewed the quarterly report submitted by an employee named Lin Shen line by line. Back then, she'd felt like she stood atop the peak of everything. Su buried her face in her knees. Her shoulders trembled once. Then again, no sound escaped her. Lin Shen paused for half a second as he passed the doorway. He didn't step inside. He kept walking forward. By the time the sky sank into complete darkness, the 4 of them sat gathered in the 2nd floor clinic. No fire burned. We can't light any flames, Lu Yuan stated flatly, reciting the words like reading lab protocol. Aerosol particles from smoke spread outward at least 200 meters under stable atmospheric conditions, and firelight is visible from over a kilometer away with no obstructions. Combine the 2. You might as well hand the mutated beasts a direct map to our location. Zhang Feng let out a low grunt, signaling his agreement. Darkness, silence, no scent. The 3 core rules to stay alive. Lin Shen twisted the hand crank flashlight down to its dimmest setting, barely casting enough light to illuminate half a meter of ground at his feet. Each of the 4 claimed a corner, backs pressed against the walls. The blackness outside the window looked like ink drowned deep water. Distant, drawn-out roars echoed every now and then, rumbling dully through the ruins. No one spoke a word. 1800 hours sharp. A glowing screen flickered to life in the top left corner of their retinas. Cold system text scrolled across it line by line. Daily settlement triggered. Counting official shelter members count complete. Current shelter population. For people. Settlement points awarded, plus 400. Current point balance, 455 points. Only 45 points short of the blueprint. Lin Shen leaned against the wall and closed his eyes faintly in the dark. Another settlement tomorrow at 6 p.m. 455 plus 400 would make 855. The blueprint cost 500, leaving 355 points, more than enough for our first batch of supplies. Just one more day? As long as all 4 of them survived until then. The settlement notification faded, leaving nothing but the sound of 4 sets of breathing filling the clinic. Susu's stomach was the first to break the silence. A sharp, cramping gurgle echoed through the dead quiet room, loud as a drumbeat. She froze, clamping both hands over her stomach, her face burning hot with embarrassment in the dark. Right after, Lu Yuan's stomach let out an equally unignorable rumble. The doctor coughed dryly to brush it off, but his stomach growled again 2 seconds later. Zhang Feng didn't make a sound. Yet by the faint glow of the flashlight, Lin Shen spotted the flaky white skin peeling off his lips, and the blood scab along the old scar at the corner of his mouth split pale and cracked from dehydration. A veteran could endure pain, but not thirst. Lin Shen stood up. There's a storage closet all the way at the back of the first floor. I didn't get a chance to check it this afternoon. I'm going to take a look. Want me to come with you? Zhang Feng's voice drifted over from behind. No need. Rest here, keep watch on the door. Lin Shen didn't turn back, his footsteps fading down the hall. Zhang Feng leaned back against the wall without another word. But a mental tally unspooled in his mind. The brand new fire axe, clean tactical jackets, bulging backpacks, none of which looked like salvage scavenged from the ruins. Compare that to the iodine and gauze they'd found earlier that day, caked thick with grime and worn thin with age. Set side by side, anyone with eyes could tell they came from 2 entirely different sources. Zhang Feng closed his eyes. There was an old saying from the battlefield, never ask what your teammate keeps in their pack, only watch if they pull it out when lives hang in the balance. So far, Lin Shen had delivered every single time. That was enough for him. First floor inner clinic room. Lin Shen shut the door, confirmed there was no noise outside, then lifted a hand. The glowing screen in the top left of his vision unfurled. System shop. Lin Shen didn't rush to place an order. His thumb slid down the category list first. Food section, water section, medical section, weapon section. He browsed all of these already. He scrolled further down. Construction materials section, cement, steel rebar, thermal insulation boards, waterproof membrane rolls tools section, diesel generators, welding machines, hand crank drills protection section, cold-resistant sleeping bags, military parkas, heat packs. Lin Shen's finger paused over the cold-resistant sleeping bags. Rated for temperatures as low as minus 40 degrees Celsius. 15 points apiece. For people meant 60 points total. He'd sort out what extra materials they needed after the primary shelter was built. 8 bottles of purified water, 8 compressed biscuit packs, 2 chocolate bars. 20 points total. Purchase successful. Current point balance, 435 points. A pile of brand new packaged supplies materialized on the dusty wasteland floor at his feet, glaringly bright against the grime. Lin Shen knelt down, swept a handful of dust from the corner, and spread it evenly over every water bottle and biscuit wrapper to cover all logos. He scraped worn scratch marks across the plastic packaging with his nail and crumpled natural creases into the chocolate foil wrappers. The whole process took less than 2 minutes. He stuffed the supplies into the bottom of his backpack and brushed the dust off his knees. Back on the second floor, Lin Shen set the backpack down. Found some supplies. He split the water and biscuits evenly between the 4 of them. Don't ration yourselves. We've got labor work ahead tomorrow. Everyone needs to eat their fill tonight. Susu's hands shook as she twisted open her water bottle. She choked on her first sip, wiped her mouth, then chugged a second mouthful. Lu Yuan habitually sniffed his biscuit to check it was safe before taking a bite. Zhang Feng tore open his pack with one hand, finished the biscuits in 3 bites, and washed down the crumbs with 2 gulps of water. The whole sequence took no more than 40 seconds. As he took his biscuit packet, his fingertips brushed the surface. The dust coating was applied, not naturally accumulated. Zhang Feng chewed slowly, then shot Lin Shen a faint grin, saying nothing at all. With food in their stomachs, fear receded a small step back. Shall we talk? Lu Yuan pushed his glasses up. Let's share our backgrounds to make teamwork smoother. Zhang Feng spoke first. Discharged reconnaissance soldier, 8 years of service. I was leading a corporate team on a mountain team building trip when the white light hit. Everyone vanished in an instant, leaving me standing alone in these ruins. Never even got paid for the trip, either. Lu Yuan picked up next, PhD candidate at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. I was monitoring data in my lab when the transport happened. I woke up sprawled across a wrecked taxi, still clutching a glass slide. He pulled out the slide with a chipped corner and waved it lightly. A souvenir. Su fell silent for several seconds before speaking. Department manager at an internet company. Right before the transport, I was reprimanding staff in my office. Reprimand who? Lu Yuan asked casually. The air turned stiff instantly. Su dropped her head, twisting the hem of her shirt tightly between her fingers. Zhang Feng's gaze flicked back and forth between Su and Lin Shun. Lin Shun leaned against the wall drinking water, refusing to engage with the question. Lu Yuan realized he'd stepped on a sensitive subject and quickly shifted focus to Lin Shun. What about you? Office worker. Two plain, unadorned words. A short silence followed. Then Lu Yuan changed the subject. I have a critical concern. It's been less than 40 hours since the extreme cold descended, and this clinic can't withstand frigid temperatures. No heating, proper ceiling, or fuel to speak of. If we use this as a shelter, all four of us will suffer hypothermia within 6 to 8 hours. Quiet settled over the clinic again. Anxiety washed over Su once more, and Zhang Feng's fingers froze mid-rest on the fire axe handle. Lin Shun didn't answer directly. Are there any intact pre-built facilities out in the wasteland we can renovate into a shelter? Civil air defense bunkers, underground fallout shelters. Lu Yuan's mind raced fast. Small, thick-walled spaces can hold above freezing temperatures once fitted with insulation and heat sources. But we need construction materials, and supplies like that are scarce out here in the ruins. Lu Yuan trailed off, his gaze lingering meaningfully on Lin Shun. He'd noticed the suspiciously clean, salvaged supplies earlier, but chose not to voice his suspicion. Lin Shun met his stare unflinchingly, his voice low yet steady. I'll resolve the shelter issue by tomorrow afternoon. No further explanation needed. Zhang Feng spoke up first. Understood, we follow your lead. For plain words, yet they carried the trust forged through years of life or death combat. Lu Yuan closed his mouth and nodded. We'll wait until tomorrow as well. Lin Shun began assigning tasks. Zhang Feng, you'll take Lu Yuan to scout the surrounding 200 meters tomorrow morning. Mark safe routes and zones with mutated beast activity. Lu Yuan, draw a detailed map and organize patterns of beast movement. Su, you stay behind to reinforce the doors and windows. Night watch will be split into 2 shifts. Lu Yuan and I take the first half of the night. Zhang Feng and Su the second. Zhang Feng frowned. Su has no combat experience. You have a cracked rib. The first shift is meant for rest. Lin Shun cut him off, turning to Su. Can you wake everyone immediately if you hear any disturbance? Su nodded hard. I can do it. First half of the night. The darkness outside the window hung thick as a solid wall, distant beast roars dragging on far into the void. Lu Yuan suddenly lowered his voice to a whisper. North side. Did you see that? See what? Lin Shun didn't shift his position. The second floor of that gray building 800 meters away. Lu Yuan pointed out the window. Intermittent open flame. Lin Shun fell silent. He'd spotted the same glow from the rooftop earlier. There are 2 possibilities. Lu Yuan pushed his glasses up. First, recklessness bordering on stupidity. Lighting an open flame after dark pins your exact location for every mutated beast within miles. They won't survive the night. Second, he dropped his voice to barely audible, pausing a beat. They're confident they won't be attacked. Lin Shun tilted his head to glance outside. 800 meters due north, a small orange glow flickered on and off unhurriedly through the blackness. After 8 p.m., the clinic sank into total darkness. Doors on the first floor were barricaded tight, with waiting room chairs and metal filing cabinets. The soft, uneven rhythm of Zhang Feng and Su's breathing drifted over from the corner. They'd fallen asleep. Lin Shun and Lu Yuan sat side by the second-floor window, backs pressed against the wall, faces angled toward the window covered in cardboard. A 2-finger-wide slit had been cut into the cardboard, just large enough for one eye to peer through. The block lay deathly quiet. Distant beast roars rumbled faintly through the ruins before fading away. Lin Shun's gaze drifted through the slit, habitually scanning due north. The orange glow in the second-floor window of the gray building 800 meters away still flickered on and off at a steady rhythm. 1 flash, 2 flashes, 3 flashes. Lu Yuan watched alongside him, pushing his glasses up and mouthing words without making a sound. The 2 men stared silently for 20 full minutes. It's gone out. Lu Yuan breathed out in a near-silent hush. Lin Chen's pupils constricted sharply. The orange light hadn't dimmed gradually, as if burning out naturally. It had been snuffed out in an instant, vanishing from sight completely. Lin Chen's right eyelid twitched once, then again. He didn't put stock in omens, yet his hand drifted to rest on the Glock 17 holstered at his waist. Wake the others. Lu Yuan didn't question the order. He shuffled carefully over broken glass on the floor toward the staircase and headed down to the first floor. 2 minutes later, all 4 people were assembled upstairs. The second Lu Yuan shook Zhang Feng awake. The veteran's hand clamped tight around the fire axe. A soldier's internal clock was etched into his bones. No matter how deep his sleep, a single touch jolted him fully alert. Su lagged a split second behind. She stirred drowsily, about to let out a sound. Zhang Feng clapped a palm over her mouth, holding a single finger to his lips. Su's eyes blew wide. Then she nodded sharply a second later. Zhang Feng lifted his hand away. The 4 of them huddled low by the second-floor window, holding their breathing as shallow as possible. Nothing moved outside. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15 minutes. The block fell so quiet they could hear their own heartbeats pounding in their ears. At the 20-minute mark, the alley west of the clinic, the crunch of gravel underfoot. More than one person. Lin Chen silently drew his Glock 17, lifting his left hand to signal Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan nodded, slipping toward the staircase in the dark. Zhang Feng didn't need any prompting. He'd already crossed to the opposite side of the window, dropping to one knee with the axe blade angled toward the entrance. Su crouched in the corner, hands pressed tight over her mouth, eyes wide with fright, but she didn't make a single noise. She'd learned fast. Bang, bang, bang. The front door of the first floor banged repeatedly. Anyone in there? A hoarse male voice carried over, breathless and strained. I know you're inside. Please open up. We've been chased all the way here by mutant rats. Lin Chen stayed motionless. He peered down through the slit in the cardboard. Gray diffused moonlight filtered through the broken dome overhead, casting faint outlines of 4 figures crowded against the clinic entrance. A man in his 30s clutched a young girl tight to his chest. The child buried her face against his shoulder, her body shaking with quiet sobs. A dark damp stain streaked down the right leg of his trousers, glinting black in the moonlight, blood. Behind him stood a woman wearing medical scrubs, the standard uniform for hospital nursing staff. Lin Chen studied the uniform briefly. The cut was a looser, standardized hospital design, not a modified costume. Her face was ashen, empty-handed, her body trembling nonstop. The last figure caught Lin Chen's eye for a longer beat. A young woman, roughly 160 centimeters tall, with short hair and a lightweight windbreaker. She stood with her back to the clinic entrance, facing the path they'd fled from, feet shoulder-width apart with her weight lowered, her right hand wrapped firmly around an object. Lin Chen glanced down the road they'd come from. Northwest. A straight line stretching back to the gray building 800 meters away. They'd run here from that direction. The door banged 3 more times, the man's voice growing more desperate. Please, the little girl is only 6 years old. The child's cries rose to a shrill pitch. Lin Chen stared at the figures outside the slit for 10 full seconds. Blood continued dripping down the man's injured right leg. He swayed unsteadily, propping himself against the doorframe to stay upright. The woman in scrubs shook so violently she could barely stand. The young woman covering their rear never once turned to glance back at the clinic, her gaze fixed firmly on the road behind them. On the surface, none of them appeared to pose an immediate threat. If they could join the shelter's roster, each settlement would grant an extra 400 points. The temptation was immense. Lin Chen pulled his gaze away, turning his head to look at Zhang Feng beside him. Open the door, only crack it wide enough for a single person to slip through. Zhang Feng didn't hesitate. He carried the fire axe downstairs, dragged the waiting room chair blocking the front door half a meter aside, and pulled the door open to a narrow slit just wide enough for someone to squeeze through sideways. He held the fire axe horizontally across his chest, blade pointed outward. The man squeezed through first, still clutching the little girl tight against his torso. The woman in medical scrubs followed close behind. The young woman covering their rear entered last. Her first move upon stepping inside wasn't to head deeper into the clinic. She twisted around to stare out the doorway. 3 full seconds passed. Once she confirmed nothing had followed them, she gave Zhang Feng a small nod. Zhang Feng pushed the door shut, shoving the heavy chair back to barricade it again. The instant the door latched closed, scratch, 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 scratch. A dense, endless patter of tiny claws scraping against pavement echoed from the street outside the clinic, like pouring a pot of uncooked rice across a sheet of metal. Mutant rats. They caught up. Su's entire back went rigid. Lu Yuan instinctively stepped half a pace backward, his hand brushing the wall for balance. The little girl in the man's arms wailed louder, and the man patted her back, his voice trembling. "It's all right, don't be scared, I've got you." Lin Shun pressed his face to the door, peering through the crack. The pavement outside the clinic swarmed with gray, furred mutant rats. A rough count under the moonlight put their numbers above 30. They were smaller than the mutants they'd spotted around the shopping mall earlier that day, but their fangs stretched longer, their eyes clouded and bloodshot red. More than 30 mutant rats lined up perfectly 3 meters away from the clinic's front door, arranged in neat, uniform rows. They didn't scratch at the door, gnaw at the walls, jostle one another, or even make a sound. They simply squatted there, motionless. Every hair on the back of Lin Chen's neck stood straight on end. Zhang Feng caught sight of them too. His pupils shrank to pinpricks, lips pressed thin into a tight line. He'd seen rats before, on battlefields, deep in jungle terrain. Rodents were chaotic, greedy, scrambling over one another in mindless frenzy. He'd never seen them line up, in orderly formation. Lu Yuan squeezed up beside the door crack, took one look, and gasped sharply. "This isn't right," he said in a barely audible murmur. When herd animals move freely, their spatial distribution follows a Poisson distribution, randomly scattered. But these rats are spaced nearly equidistant from one another. They're all responding to a unified external signal directing their movements. He paused for a beat. They're waiting for an order. At those 4 words, Lin Chen spun his head sharply. His gaze cut through the darkness and landed on the young woman standing in the middle of the hallway, facing the clinic's front entrance. Her lips twitched subtly, as if she were counting under her breath. 27, 28, 31. Lin Chen watched her right hand slip out of her coat pocket, clutching something tightly. A metal tube, as thick as a thumb and less than 10 centimeters long, flat on one end with a mouthpiece on the other. A whistle. The woman brought the whistle to her lips, puffed out her cheeks, and blew hard. A shrill, high-pitched tone split the air. The sound stung Lin Chen's eardrums, and Su clapped her hands over her ears. But the noise pierced through the wooden door and vanished into the night. Outside, more than 30 mutated rats lurched backward 2 steps in perfect unison, moving as if pulled by a single shared rope. The whistle fell silent. The rat pack froze for a single second. Then they crept forward a small distance again. The woman blew a second time. The rats retreated once more. A third blast. The swarm scattered. Gray shapes streamed backward like a receding tide, crossing the street, vanishing into the shadows of the buildings opposite, before hunkering down 10 meters away. From afar, they merged into a vast gray blanket. They would not leave, yet they dared not draw any closer. The young woman lowered the whistle. The metal tube had left a red indentation pressed into her palm. Outside, the mutated rats squatting 10 meters off formed a still gray tableau, their crimson eyes glinting beneath the moonlight like smoldering cigarette butts. Lin Chen sorted through every piece of information racing through his mind. They had come from due north. They had chased the group for at least 800 meters. The man's leg wound still oozed blood. He was drained of all stamina. The woman in the nurse uniform had no combat capability whatsoever. The little girl was only 6 or 7 years old. Only this young woman remained standing, and she held a whistle capable of commanding 30-plus mutated rats to retreat in lockstep. Lin Chen stepped over the half-crouching man and walked up to her, holding out a hand. The whistle. The young woman's breathing had not yet steadied, but she quickly tucked the whistle back into her coat pocket, her fingers wrapped firmly around it. She stared straight at Lin Chen. "Are you trying to take it from me?" Her voice was quiet, yet steady with resolve. With the whistle secured in her pocket, she shifted half a step back, raising her empty left hand to shield her torso. Lin Chen did not move. He noted her stance, her heels barely lifted off the ground, poised to spin and run at any moment. Yet she held her ground. She knew full well that stepping outside this door meant facing 30 mutated rats waiting in the dark. "I'm not stealing it. I'm asking to borrow it." "Borrow?" The woman let out a cold huff. "I don't even know you." Lin Chen withdrew his hand and stepped back 1 pace, granting her a safe buffer zone. "Where did you get this thing?" The woman said nothing, only tightening the line of her jaw. It was the man clutching the little girl who spoke first. Half kneeling on the floor, his right trouser leg soaked through with blood from his bite wound, beads of sweat streaked his forehead. "She found it, rummaging through an underground parking garage." "Joe, don't say another word." The woman shot him a sharp glare over her shoulder. The man shrank back slightly, but kept talking. "Brother, don't misunderstand her. Xinyu's just sharp-tongued. She means no harm. We found the whistle together while scavenging for supplies, tucked under a toolbox in the garage corner, inside an iron box covered in dust thick as felt. Xinyu. Lin Chen memorized the name. She didn't even know what it could do at first. The man went on, patting the little girl's back, his words broken with exhaustion. We were hiding from rats on the second floor, and Xinyu pulled it out on a whim to mess around with. On a whim. Xinyu twisted around to retort. All right. Out of curiosity, happy now? The man hastily backed down. The second she blew it, those rats jolted as if electrocuted and leaped backward in unison. We were both stunned. We tested it 2 more times after that, and it worked every single time. This isn't an ordinary whistle. Xinyu's fingers squeezed the metal tube tight inside her pocket. She knew that better than anyone. The first time she'd blown it, 3 mutated rats had been clambering through the window. Panicked, she'd grabbed the first thing within reach and blown it without thinking. The instant the high tone rang out, the 3 rats tumbled off the windowsill, twitching on their backs for several seconds before scrambling away. Every hair on her body had stood on end in that moment. Yet the device only seemed to affect mutated rats. That was why she'd stayed behind to cover their retreat during their 800-meter dash year, blowing the whistle once to drive the rats back a stretch, repeating the cycle until she'd dragged the 3 of them to safety. Her lips were raw and numb from blowing nonstop. Lin Chun tilted his head, his gaze drifting past her shoulder to settle on the half-kneeling man. He was in his early 30s, with a square jaw, the defined muscles of his arms visible even beneath his work coveralls. 2 dark, gaping bite marks marred his right calf, ragged torn flesh lining the edges. Blood had dyed his pant leg a deep brown, pooling on the floor beneath his lower leg. The little girl in his arms buried her face in his shoulder, her body shuddering as she hiccuped through her tears, clinging to him without letting go. The man knelt on one knee, his arms wrapping tighter around the child, his lips ashen, sweat dripping off his chin. He had lost a dangerous amount of blood. Lin Chen pulled his gaze away and turned back to Xinyu. She spoke up. I know what you want, she said in a low, breath-saving tone. I can give you the whistle, but you have to agree to one condition. She lifted a finger toward the kneeling man. Zhou used to operate tower cranes. On our escape from the northern apartment block, a mutated rat lunged for the little girl, and he kicked it away. Those 2 bites on his leg are the price he paid. Her finger shifted slightly to point at the woman in the nurse's uniform. That's Zhou Qi. She's a medical streamer. She paused briefly. We met her along the way. At the mention of her line of work, Zhou Qi's lips parted, but she offered no rebuttal. The young woman's gaze returned to Lin Chen. Treat his leg, and the whistle is yours. Lin Chen stared into her eyes for 3 full seconds. I don't want the whistle. Xinyu's expression froze. She had braced herself for haggling, even for him to snatch it by force. She had never anticipated outright refusal. I want you. The air in the clinic turned frigid. The young woman's pupils constricted sharply. She stepped half a pace back, shifting her weight low, yanking the whistle out of her pocket to grip it firmly in her fist. This was not fear. It was a combat stance. Beside them, Su froze, her mouth hanging open as she stared at Lin Chen's profile, a figurative cord snapping inside her head. Lu Yuan's fingers halted mid-motion as he pushed up his glasses, a flicker of complex emotion flickering behind the lenses. Zhang Feng did not move, but his knuckles wrapped around the handle of his fire axe, his gaze locked rigidly on Lin Chen, waiting for his next move. Zhou Qi reacted the most violently. She strode forward to plant herself squarely in front of Xinyu, throwing her arms wide to shield the younger woman. Her voice trembled, yet carried loudly through the room. What do you intend to do? Does the end of the world mean you can act without restraint? Lin Chen glanced at her. He did not look at the arms stretched out to block him, nor her pale face. Instead, his eyes swept over the loose neckline of her medical uniform, its tailored waist, and the cropped hem that ended far above her ankles. He then pulled his gaze away. My name is Lin Chen, he stated. I call the shots here. He nodded toward the injured man on the floor. Those 2 puncture wounds on his leg are irregular lacerations from mutated rat fangs. Their teeth almost certainly carry unknown pathogens. Without debridement and anti-infection treatment, the wounds will fester within 6 to 8 hours. His gaze swept across each of the 3 newcomers in turn. Do you have antiseptic? Gauze? Antibiotics? A secure place to spend the night? Zhou Qi's outstretched arms stiffened, her lips parting and closing without a single word coming out. Behind her, Xinyu's fist around the whistle loosened slightly. Lin Chen's tone remained flat, each word deliberate and heavy. What I meant earlier is this. All 4 of you, plus the 3 with you, join my group. He fixed his eyes on the young woman. I supply food, clean water, medicine, and a temporary safe haven. In return, you follow every order I give without question. Zhou can operate tower cranes. He's strong and capable of labor. The little girl will be fed and kept safe under our protection. Zhou Qi has medical live stream experience, exactly the skill set our team lacks. Finally, he held up one finger, gesturing toward the whistle tucked in Xin Yu's pocket. You and your whistle are the most valuable part of this deal. That's why I said I want you. I want your unique ability. Do you understand? Silence hung heavy in the examination room for 3 full seconds. Zhou Qi slowly lowered her defensive arms. A faint flicker of relief crossed Xin Yu's face, only to vanish as she pressed her lips tight once more. Her eyes drifted to Lin Chen's companions in the background. Zhang Feng leaning against the wall with his fire axe resting across his knees, his face devoid of any excess emotion. Lu Yuan cross-legged in the corner, adjusting his glasses as if listening to an academic defense. Su Su stood up. She walked to Lin Chen's side and turned to face the 4 strangers. Her back straight, chin tilted slightly upward. Her gaze slid from Zhou Qi to Xun Yu, before landing on the kneeling man and the tear-streaked little girl beside him. He's telling the truth, Su Su said, her voice steady, calm yet crystal clear. Stay here, and you'll have medicine, food, and solid walls that can keep those creatures out. Step outside. She tilted her chin toward the front door. 30-some rats are still camped out there. Your whistle can scare them off once, twice, but you can't blow it all night long. Come dawn, even bigger swarms will arrive. Do the math for yourselves. Without us, how much longer can you survive? She paused, glancing sideways at Lin Chen. He's not a kind man. Her tone was neutral, as if stating an objective fact. But he always keeps his word. Lin Chen shot her a quick look. He said nothing, but the corner of his mouth tugged upward faintly. The woman had learned fast. Xin Yu stared at Lin Chen for a long time. How many people are in your group? 4. If we join, that makes 8. Correct. Can you sustain 8 people? Lin Chen did not answer the question. That's my responsibility, not yours to worry about, he said evenly, leaving no room for argument. Right now I only need one answer. Will you join? 2 beats of silence passed through the clinic. Zhou spoke first, half kneeling on the ground, blood still dripping from his calf, his voice soft yet unwavering. I'll join. He glanced down at the little girl clinging to him and set her gently on her feet. She gripped the hem of his shirt tightly, her eyes swollen red, her cheeks smudged with dirt and dried tears. But I have one condition. Zhou lifted his head to meet Lin Chen's gaze. Tong Tong stays with me. I found her along the way. We don't know where her family is. I won't leave her behind. How old is she? 7. Lin Chen mentally tallied his supplies and shelter points. 7 years old. She would barely consume any rations. She could not contribute to combat. He had never expected a child to fight. But the system only recognized official shelter residents, regardless of age. Every new person meant an extra 100 points each day, a pure gain with no burden attached. Moreover, young children bonded fiercely to whoever cared for them. Loyalty would never be an issue with her. She joins as well, Lin Chen nodded. But you take full responsibility for her. Food and water will be allocated equally by head count. She will never go without her share. Zhou nodded hard, his eyes glistening, unable to find more words to speak. Zhou Qi knelt beside him, pressing her palm to his calf wound to slow the bleeding, then lifted her head. I'll join too. Her voice was far quieter than when she'd shielded Xin Yu earlier, her gaze fixed on her blood-stained fingertips rather than Lin Chen. A faint, muffled whimper echoed from the corner. Tong Tong stood beside Zhou, clutching her stomach with both hands, stifling her cries. Su Su walked over to her. She pulled a piece of chocolate from her pocket, one of the 2 Lin Chen had retrieved from the storage room, and split with her, and crouched down, tearing open the foil wrapper to hold it out to the little girl. You're hungry, aren't you? Eat this. Tong Tong glanced at the chocolate, then back at Su Su, tears still clinging to her cheeks, and mumbled shyly, Thank you, sister. Su Su's hand hesitated for a split second. She stared at the child's dusty face for 2 heartbeats, then brushed away the grime coating her forehead to reveal clean skin underneath. Her fingers brushed through the girl's hair with a gentleness that felt utterly unlike her usual demeanor. Go on, eat. Su Su's voice softened, patting the top of her head lightly. Lin Chen watched the exchange without comment. Only 2 days prior, this same woman had sat in a leather armchair on the 23rd floor, tapping her nails against the table impatiently. People could change faster than the weather. He turned to address the last remaining newcomer. Xin Yu stood in the middle of the hallway, her right hand still curled around the whistle in her pocket, her lips pressed into a thin, rigid line. Her eyes swept the entire clinic. Zhang Feng leaning against the wall, Su Su crouched beside the child, Lu Yuan seated in the corner, Zhou kneeling on the floor. She took every detail in. Then she unclenched her fist. I'll join as well. Lin Chen nodded. You can keep the whistle. It will still be useful later on. Surprise flickered across Shen Yu's face. She had prepared endless bargaining points, even contingency plans for him to seize the whistle by force. She had never imagined he would let her hold on to it without a fight. She parted her lips to speak, then closed them again without a word. Lin Chen told Su Su to fetch the leftover iodophore and gauze they had used to treat Zhang Feng's injury earlier. Su Su handed the supplies to Zhou Qi, who immediately set about cleaning and bandaging Zhou's rat-bite wound. Iodophore splashed across the raw lacerations, and Zhou let out a low groan, fresh sweat beading across his forehead. Lin Chen stood by and observed for half a minute. Zhou Qi's technique was firm and earnest, yet the gauze wrapping was unevenly tight. She poured the antiseptic without measuring, and the angle of her tweezers during debridement was awkward. Are you truly a medical professional? Lin Chen asked. Zhou Qi's hands froze mid-bandage. She lifted her head to glance at him, her expression a mix of embarrassment and exasperation. Actually, I'm not. A bead of silence fell over the examination room. I'm a live-streaming fashion creator, Zhou Qi mumbled, resuming her bandaging work. Her head hung low. I was showcasing a new costume line on stream the moment the world transferred us over. She tugged at the loose neckline of the medical-style costume she wore. You can see the outfit for yourselves. This is the new fall collection, themed around medical ward uniforms. Another beat of silence passed. Zhang Feng, leaning against the wall, suddenly raised an eyebrow. No wonder she looked familiar, he muttered under his breath. Lin Chen paused briefly. Now that you mention it, I thought the same thing. The two men exchanged a faint, knowing smile. Lu Yuan looked utterly confused, with no clue what they were referencing. Zhou Qi's head shot up, shooting sharp glares at the pair. Lin Chen shifted his gaze away, his expression unruffled. Zhang Feng cleared his throat awkwardly. Su Su knelt beside Tong Tong, the corners of her lips twitching upward before she forced her expression neutral again. The suffocating tension in the room thinned slightly, a small crack of ease breaking through the heavy atmosphere. It was at that exact moment. For lines of light flashed consecutively in the upper left corner of Lin Chen's field of vision, the system alert chime ringing one after another. Qualified survivor detected. Zhou Jigang has joined the shelter. Qualified survivor detected. Tong Tong has joined the shelter. Qualified survivor detected. Zhou Qi has joined the shelter. Qualified survivor detected. Shen Yu has joined the shelter. Current shelter population, 8 people. The 4 notifications popped up in rapid succession. Lin Chen dismissed the translucent system panel. 8 residents. 100 shelter points per person daily. 80 points total to be credited tomorrow at 6 in the afternoon. It was more than enough to sustain them, and even to live comfortably. Heating, hot running water, electric lighting. While other survivors huddled together shivering to death in the coming extreme cold, his people would have access to warm water to drink. Lin Chen leaned against the wall, his face impassive. He pushed himself upright and swept his eyes over the group. We will redo the night watch rotation. Zhang Feng and Lu Yuan take the first half of the night. Su Su and I cover the late shift. Everyone else gets rest. We have countless tasks to tackle tomorrow. No one voiced any objections. Zhou's wound was fully dressed, wrapped thickly in gauze that left his calf swaddled like a mummy, though the bleeding had at last stopped. Tong Tong curled up in his arms, half a piece of chocolate still in her mouth as she drifted off to sleep. Shen Yu leaned against the wall, the whistle clutched in her palm, her gaze flicking to Lin Chen one final time before she closed her eyes. The night passed without incident. Dawn arrived. When faint gray light seeped through the broken dome overhead, every single person jolted awake to the same voice echoing directly inside their minds. A cold, emotionless electronic tone resounded. Warning. The extreme cold apocalypse will descend in exactly 24 hours. Current countdown, midnight. All survivors are ordered to complete emergency preparations immediately. Critical alert. Any survivor who fails to take shelter within a fully enclosed safe zone and stockpile sufficient thermal supplies will face a 100 mortality rate. Zhou pulled Tong Tong tighter against his chest. The little girl was still half asleep, nuzzling her face into his neck drowsily. Shen Yu's complexion paled significantly. Her lips moved, yet no words escaped her. Zhou Qi ground her teeth, digging her fingernails into her own forearm. Su Su did not glance toward the window or the system warning. Her eyes stayed fixed firmly on Lin Chen. Zhang Feng was already standing, his fire axe gripped in hand. Lu Yuan pushed up his glasses, his eyes behind the lenses locked on Lin Chen. Every person in the room waited silently for his response. Lin Chen stood up. His gaze swept slowly across the 8 people one by one. His expression was blank, his voice steady. Pack your things. We leave in 1 hour. Less than 10 seconds after Lin Shan finished speaking, Zhang Feng had slung his backpack over his shoulders. A fire axe hung at his waist, and he dragged a fully loaded hiking pack with one hand, his footsteps heavy and dull, echoing down the stairs. Su twisted open her water canteen and let Tong Tong take a couple of sips, wiped the dust off the little girl's cheeks with her sleeve, then took her hand and followed behind. Xinyu walked at the very back, clutching a whistle tight in her right hand, her knuckles white with strain. Zhou Qi helped Zhou Jigang rise from where he'd slumped against the wall. Zhou Jigang gritted his teeth to hold himself upright, but the moment his right foot bore weight, he stumbled forward half a step, clinging hard to the wall with his left hand to keep from collapsing. At the stairwell bend, Zhou Jigang lost his balance completely. He lurched forward, yanking Zhou Qi off her feet. The two crashed into the wall at the corner. Zhou Qi's knee slammed against the sharp edge of a step, and she stifled a groan, ignoring her own pain to check Zhou Jigang's injured leg first. The second her fingers touched the bandage, her face paled. The gauze was soaked, not with blood. Yellowish-gray pus seeped out from the bandage's edges, trickling down his calf, and a sickly, sweet rotting stench filled the air. The skin surrounding the wound had turned a murky black-gray, the swelling twice as large as it had been the night before, the tissue stretched taut and shiny. Zhou Jigang's forehead burned hot enough to scald skin, his teeth chattered violently, his lips stained a deep purplish blue. Lu Yuan knelt down for a quick look, all color draining from his face. The pathogen from the mutated rat's saliva has spread deep into his tissue, he whispered, each word sharp as a nail driven into their hearts. Iodine applied externally can't contain this infection anymore. He needs oral broad-spectrum antibiotics to fight the bacteria systemically. He glanced up at Lin Shan. If we don't get them into him, he'll develop sepsis within 6 hours. Sepsis. Just one word. Zhou Qi's hands froze mid-air, every trace of blood vanishing from her face in an instant. Su knew nothing of medicine, but she understood what that single term meant, death. Xinyu squeezed her whistle even tighter. Zhou Jigang leaned back against the wall, gasping for breath until he could steady his voice. I'm fine. I can walk. He pushed himself upright against the wall, his tone rigid despite the tremor in his voice. Don't slow everyone down on my account. His right hand still clutched the hem of Tong Tong's jacket, his knuckles drained of all color. Tong Tong stood beside him, tilting her head to stare unblinkingly at his black, gray swollen calf. The 7-year-old girl said nothing, shed no tears. She just watched, silent. 5 or 6 seconds of quiet stretched by. Then Tong Tong suddenly reached into her pocket, rummaging around until she pulled something out. A glass marble. It was small, no bigger than her thumbnail, etched with a swirling band of blue. Warmed through by her body heat, its surface dusted with fine grit. She lifted the marble high up to Lin Shan, her arm trembling violently. She held it aloft like it was the most precious treasure in the entire world. Uncle. Her voice was barely audible, yet every syllable clear and deliberate. Take this. Please save Uncle Zhou. All sound in the stairwell cut off completely. Su's fingers dug deep into the nylon straps of her backpack. Zhang Feng lowered his head, one hand resting on the axe handle, the other balled tight at his side. Zhou Qi knelt beside them, her lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. Tong Tong's eyes reddened, but she refused to cry. Uncle Zhou had told her tears solved nothing. The marble had been found tucked in a crack of rubble after the collapse. That blue patterned glass sphere was everything she owned. She held out her only possession, her arm shaking, refusing to lower it. Lin Shan knelt down slowly, dropping to one knee so his eyes met the little girl's level. He looked at her, her eyes swollen and wide, stray tears clinging to her eyelashes, her small face caked gray with dirt. Lin Shan reached out, took the marble, and closed it in his palm. Deal. 2 plain, unhesitating words. Tong Tong's tears finally spilled over, dropping one after another onto her scuffed, dirty shoes. But the corners of her mouth tugged upward in a faint smile. Lin Shan tucked the marble into the inner pocket of his jacket. The pocket had been empty before, now it held a glass marble worth a human life. Zhou Qi turned her head away, rubbing her eyes hard against the back of her hand. Su sniffled, bending to pretend sorting her backpack, her head bowed the whole time. Lin Shan stood, speaking casually. I'll check the pharmacy next door. I passed it yesterday. Its windows weren't fully crushed in. There might still be supplies left. With that, he headed straight for the side exit. Zhang Feng watched his retreating figure. Half the wall of the neighboring building had collapsed. Jagged steel rebars jutted out from broken concrete. Lin Shan slipped inside, confirmed no one lingered nearby, then opened a glowing translucent system screen floating before him. His finger slid to the medicine section. Antibiotic anti-inflammatory pills, 1 box of amoxicillin capsules. 5 points, 5 points. A single box of medicine, enough to save a life in this wasteland. He skimmed the food section next. Self-heated braised beef rice. 8 points. His gaze lingered there for 3 seconds, his atoms apple bobbing. When had he last eaten a hot meal? The beef noodle shop downstairs from his old office, 6 yuan a bowl, before the world shifted. He closed the food menu. Purchase list: 1 box of antibiotics, 8 bottles of purified water, 8 blocks of hardtack crackers. Total cost, 21 points. Purchase successful. Current point balance, 414. He went through the routine without thought, scuffing the packaging, smearing dust across the boxes, crumpling the wrappers to look salvaged from rubble. Returning to the ground floor, he handed the supplies to Su, lowering his voice. Give the antibiotics to Zhou Qi. Follow the dosage instructions exactly. Split the water and crackers evenly among everyone. Su took the medicine box, her fingers brushing the dust coating its surface, the same fine gray grit that had covered their crackers the night before, the same worn, salvaged look. She asked no questions, turning away at once. 20 minutes later, by the second-floor window, Lin Shun, Zhang Feng, and Lu Yuan gathered to talk. We've got less than 24 hours left. Let's hash out our plans for this brutal incoming deep freeze. Zhang Feng leaned half against the wall, speaking quickly. Supplies are priority 1. 8 people need to survive the cold. Heating gear is our lifeline. Fuel, insulation materials. We'll comb every building within 500 meters, strip anything usable, and haul it with us. If time's tight, split into 2 teams. I'll lead one to scavenge the streets, you take the other. Lu Yuan shook his head. Scavenging supplies is necessary, but your priorities are backwards. What's the point of gathering tons of goods if we have nowhere safe to store them? This clinic won't cut it. Single-story brick construction, 2 broken windows, no underground levels. It won't hold above -40 degrees for more than 3 hours. We need to secure a location with underground space or thick, fully enclosed walls first. Once we lock down the shelter site, we can gather supplies around it. Pick the wrong shelter, and every load we carry is wasted. Lin Shin fell silent for 5 seconds after listening to them both. We'll combine both plans. He lifted a finger to point south, toward the jagged skyline of collapsed buildings far in the distance. We head that way. Those large multi-story structures almost certainly have underground parking garages or commercial basements, perfect for converting into a shelter. We scavenge whatever we find along the route, no unnecessary detours. Once we reach the complex, we'll mark out our shelter space first, then make a second trip to haul back all the supplies we've collected. Zhang Feng nodded. Lu Yuan thought it over, then voiced no objections. 24 hours on the clock. Every survivor out there is scrambling for food and safety. Starving humans are far more dangerous than mutated beasts. Anyone we cross paths with will either be an ally or a threat. Zhang Feng's grip tightened around his axe handle. Lu Yuan pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Understood. Downstairs, Zhou Jigang leaned against the wall, the purplish tint fading slightly from his lips. Tong Tong sat cross-legged at his legs, resting her small hand on his arm, quiet and still. Lin Shin knelt down beside them. How are you feeling? Zhou Jigang pushed himself straighter, his voice rough and hoarse. The medicine brought my fever down a little. My leg still throbs, but I can walk. I won't hold the group back. He stared earnestly at Lin Shan as he spoke. Lin Shan gave a short nod. Before departure, Lin Shan laid out their travel route. We move south, targeting the large building complex 2 kilometers out. No one strays outside sight of the group. If we encounter mutated creatures, follow Zhang Feng's lead. If we run into other survivors, he paused a beat. Listen to me. Zhang Feng dragged away the rubble blocking the main entrance. Dim gray morning light filtered through the broken sky dome, dyeing the wasteland streets a dull leaden gray. The pack of mutated rats that had lingered by the door the night before were gone without a trace, leaving only dense claw marks and crusted piles of dried waste across the pavement. The air had turned noticeably colder than the previous day. Wispy white fog curled from every breath they exhaled. The 8 stepped onto broken brick and twisted concrete, setting off southward. After 50 meters of walking, Lin Chun mentally tallied their resources. 414 points for 8 people. Their daily settlement would hit at 6 that evening, bringing an incoming 800 points, leaving a total balance of 1,214. Converting the underground shelter would cost 500 points, leaving 714 held in reserve, more than enough to sustain them long after the deep freeze hit. But all of this relied on one thing. Nothing catastrophic happening in the next 24 hours. The journey south proved far harder than they'd anticipated. The street pavement lay shattered, jagged brick fragments and bent steel rebar jutted upward from cracked asphalt, forcing them to pick their footing carefully with every step. Zhang Feng led the group, clutching a steel pipe torn from a collapsed wall in his left hand, prodding every pit and shadowed corner as they advanced. His fire axe hung at his waist, his gait identical to the patrol stance he'd used back in mountain wilderness duty. Lu Yuan walked half a step behind his right shoulder, his eyes fixed on the structural frames of the surrounding buildings rather than the ground beneath his feet. He muttered quietly to himself nonstop. Precast slabs, 6-meter span, unusable. This frame design will create severe thermal bridging once temperatures drop to -40, pulling interior temperatures level with the outdoors. No one understood his technical ramblings, nor did anyone interrupt him. Zhou Jigang leaned heavily on Zhou Qi's support, huffing for air every 3 steps, barely putting weight on his injured right leg, hopping forward solely on his left. Pus seeped through his bandage once more, no blood, just that yellowish-gray fluid, glistening faintly in the pale morning light as it dripped down his calf. Tong Tong stayed close at his side, one tiny fist curled around the hem of his work jacket, the other clenched tight at her side. Xin Yu took position near the rear of the line, her whistle gripped firmly in her right palm, head swiveling left and right to scan every black empty window opening in the surrounding rubble. Su Su walked beside Lin Chen. She'd grumble about rough terrain the day prior, but not a single complaint passed her lips today. Her jaw set tight, her gaze far harder and sharper than it had been 24 hours earlier. The 8 formed a thin 15-meter single file, walking down the widest stretch of road at the center of the street. The white fog from their breath thickened steadily. Lin Chen glanced at the environmental temperature reading in the corner of his floating system panel. 3 degrees Celsius. It had been 7 degrees when they set off. The temperature had dropped 4 degrees in 40 minutes. He said nothing of the number. Spreading word of the plummeting cold would only send the group spiraling into panic. They'd traveled roughly 800 meters when they reached a ruined crossroads. 2 buildings had collapsed diagonally across the intersection, mounds of concrete debris stacked high, leaving only a narrow 2-person wide passage cutting through the rubble. Zhang Feng reached the passage entrance and froze abruptly. He clenched his right fist, raising it to his shoulder, a silent wilderness patrol signal. Halt. Every member of the group stopped dead in their tracks. A thick, cloying stench drifted toward them on the wind. Not the dry, sour reek of mutated rat waste they'd grown used to over the past 2 days. This scent was damp, heavy with metallic rot, sharp enough to burn the throat, like gallons of fresh blood spilled across the pavement, still steaming. Fresh kill. Zhang Feng held the steel pipe horizontally before him, ducking low to creep alongside an overturned van wreck at the intersection, advancing 5 meters forward. He came to a stop, glancing back at the rest of the group. A hand gesture passed between them. Hostiles ahead. Unknown number. Large body mass. Lin Chen dropped his stance and moved forward to join him. On the pavement beside the van's wreckage lay 2 human corpses. Or more accurately, 2 mangled bodies torn apart. Their torsos had been split open from the ribcage outward, ribs splayed wide. Streaks of dragged internal organs marking curved trails across the asphalt, dark red and frothy. A severed arm lay discarded 3 meters away, pale white bone splinters exposed at the jagged break. Lu Yuan peeked around the van, his face turning sickly pale. He twisted aside and retched. Su Su clamped both hands over her mouth, fingers digging into her cheeks, eyes blown wide with horror. Zhou Qi stepped forward instantly to shield Tong Tong, pressing the little girl's face against her waist to block the gruesome sight. Lin Chen ignored the bodies entirely, focusing on the ground. 3 sets of claw marks. Not the fine, tiny scratches left by mutated rats. Deep grooves as thick as a thumb, grouped in 3s, fanning outward with over 15 centimeters of space between each mark. The claws had gouged half a centimeter deep into solid asphalt. Lu Yuan spoke in a strained whisper, his throat still heaving from nausea. 3-toed structure, claw depth and spacing match mid-sized canines, but the bone proportions are off. Their mutation level is far higher than the rats we've encountered. Zhang Feng circled around the side of the intersection, returning 3 seconds later. The look on his face made Lin Chen's hand drift to the pistol holstered at his waist. 3 of them. Zhang Feng's lips barely moved, his voice forced through gritted teeth. 40 meters out, crouched in a shop doorway feeding on something. Bigger than a full-grown large dog, their shoulders reach my waist. Pale gray skin, most of their fur shed away, jagged teeth protruding out of their jaws. He paused briefly. We circle around. Lin Chen scanned their surroundings. The alley to the left was completely blocked by collapsed building slabs, 3 layers of concrete stacked solid. Impassable even for snakes, let alone humans. The alley to the right allowed sideways passage at most, narrowing to less than 40 centimeters at its tightest point. Retreating 200 meters back to take a wide detour would cost them 40 minutes. Less than 23 hours remained on their survival countdown. Cold sweat soaked Zhou Jigang's skin, his jaw locked tight. Zhou Qi clung hard to his arm. Lin Chen stared at the crossroads for a long moment. The wind shifted direction. A cold breeze blew south to north, carrying the scent of 8 living humans straight toward the 3 feeding creatures 40 meters away. The lead mutated beast suddenly snapped its head upward. A strip of bloody tissue hung from its jaws, murky yellow eyes locking unblinkingly onto the van's hiding spot. Xinyu reacted faster than anyone else. She stuffed the whistle into her mouth, cheeks puffing out as she blew as hard as she could. A shrill, high-pitched whistle blast echoed through the rubble, bouncing off broken walls twice before fading. The 3 mutated beasts did not retreat. Not a single step backward. The lead creature shook its head, then bared its rows of protruding jagged teeth and let out a low rumbling roar. The sound rolled up from deep in its chest, heavy enough to vibrate through the pavement beneath their feet. Xinyu blew the whistle a second time. The mutated beasts took a single step forward. A third blast. No effect. The 3 pale gray creatures stepped out of the shop doorway, heavy front paws scraping white streaks across broken stone as they advanced. They moved slowly, but their path was fixed, straight for the van where the group hid. Xinyu's face drained to sickly blue-white, lowering the whistle from her lips, her hands shaking violently. She'd covered their retreat 800 meters the night before, blowing the whistle non-stop to fend off swarms of mutated rats. Everyone had counted that metal tube as their ultimate safety measure. Their last line of defense had failed completely. Zhang Feng drew his fire axe from his waistband, bending low to charge forward, shouting loud enough for everyone to hear. Fall back, all of you. The lead mutated beast burst into a sprint, flattening its body low to slide across the ground, a massive bulk of pale gray muscle surging forward. Its front paw slammed into the van's crumpled engine hood, caving the thin sheet metal inward into a crater the size of a wash basin. Zhang Feng dodged sideways, swinging the axe hard to slice into the beast's side neck. The axe blade sank roughly 2 centimeters into its gray hide, then stuck fast. The texture of the muscle beneath the skin felt unnatural to Zhang Feng, as if chopping through waterlogged rubber. Tough, elastic, dense. In the split second he struggled to yank the axe free, the second beast crashed into him from the flank. A full-force impact to his shoulder. Zhang Feng flew backward over 2 meters, slamming hard into a brick wall, dust coating his head and shoulders. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth as he pushed himself upright, a sharp stabbing pain flaring in his left ribcage, but his legs did not buckle. He held the axe horizontal before him, stepping back 1 pace. 3 beasts against 1 man. No one needed to state it aloud. The odds were impossibly stacked against them. The 3rd mutated beast ignored Zhang Feng entirely. It circled the van, dropping low to sprint straight for the group huddled in the rear. 15 meters. 10 meters. Zhou Jigang dragged his twice-swollen, injured leg forward, shoving Tong Tong behind his body. Snatching a broken steel rebar off the ground with his left hand, dropping to 1 knee to block the beast's path. Zhou Qi screamed out loud. Lin Chen's right hand wrapped around his Glock 17 pistol. The moment he lifted the barrel, 3 critical thoughts flashed through his mind. 9mm handgun rounds. Effective range 50 meters. Gunfire echoes travel no less than 1 kilometer through the rubble cityscape. If he pulled the trigger, every survivor within a kilometer would learn there were armed humans here. He hesitated for a single second. The mutated beast stood 8 meters away from Zhou Jigang. He could not wait any longer. He lined the front sight up with the pale gray skull. He squeezed the trigger. The gunshot boomed. The 9mm parabellum bullet struck the beast's right eye socket from a distance of 12 meters. The impact snapped its flat skull sharply to one side. Its forward momentum broke, and it tumbled headfirst into a pile of rubble, thrashing all 4 limbs wildly. It was not dead. Lin Chen fired a second shot. The bullet penetrated the side of its cranium. The beast convulsed for 3 seconds, then fell motionless. The echo of the 2 gunshots bounced endlessly between collapsed buildings before fading completely. The remaining 2 mutated beasts backed away from Zhang Feng 7 or 8 meters, lowering their bodies to hiss out threatening snarls. Lin Shen shifted the pistol's aim, locking onto the lead creature. A tense standoff hung in the air. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. The lead mutated beast tilted its head, its murky yellow eyes fixed on the dark muzzle of the gun. 5 seconds later, it spun around and darted into the shadows of the ruins. The second creature vanished right after it. Zhang Feng pushed himself up from the base of the wall, pressing one hand to his bruised ribs. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, no matter how many times he wiped it away. He stared silently at the Glock handgun in Lin Shen's grip. Nice piece. Su Su watched Lin Shen holster the gun at his waist, her lips parting slightly, yet she said nothing. Xinyu stood rooted to the spot, clutching her whistle, her eyes rimmed red. She could not tell if the burning sensation stemmed from shame at being utterly useless in those critical seconds, or lingering terror of watching death loom inches away, or both. Zhou Jigang sat on the ground holding Tong Tong, gasping for air. The gauze wrapped around his injured leg had soaked through with fresh blood. The little girl nestled quietly in his arms, not shedding a single tear. Lu Yuan knelt beside the mutated beast's corpse. He picked up a twig to peel back its pale gray skin, examining the muscle fibers beneath the surface. His face still looked sickly green, but his eyes lit up with curiosity. Different species follow distinct mutation patterns. Lu Yuan prodded a strand of muscle fiber with the twig. It stretched over a dozen centimeters before snapping. The density of these muscle fibers is at least 3 times that of ordinary canines. No wonder an axe could barely cut through its hide. He glanced up at Xinyu. Your whistle targets the high-frequency hearing range unique to rodents, above 40 kHz. The cochlear structures of these mutated canines have likely undergone drastic restructuring, leaving them far less sensitive to ultra-high-frequency sound waves. Lu Yuan pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. It's not the whistle that failed. It's a matter of species difference. Lin Shen did not spare the corpse a second glance. Move out. At that single word, the whole group sprang into action. Zhang Feng bit back the stabbing pain in his ribs and dragged his steel pipe forward to scout ahead. They would not retrace their original path. Lin Shen pointed to a narrow gap between 2 buildings straight left, barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Slabs of concrete and twisted metal railings overhead formed a natural overhead cover. The echo of the gunshots still hummed in everyone's skulls. The blast radius of 9 by 19 millimeters parabellum rounds stretched no less than 1 kilometer through these hollow ruins. He had no intention of gambling on how many pairs of hostile ears that noise might draw across the dead city. The team formed a single file line. Zhang Feng led the way, and Lin Shen brought up the rear. Zhou Qi supported the limping Zhou Jigang in the middle. Zhou Jigang's right foot hung entirely off the ground, forcing him to hop forward on his left leg. Su Su held Tong Tong's hand, the little girl's short legs pumping fast as she trotted along without a sound. Xinyu walked just ahead of Su Su, her right hand still clamped tight around her whistle, though she never lifted it to her lips. The earlier failure weighed heavy on her mind. 3 mutated beasts, 3 blasts of the whistle, 0 effect. She had stood frozen like a child waving a useless toy, and the humiliation stung worse than running an 800-meter sprint under pursuit. She had understood every word Lu Yuan had said about restructured cochlea and dulled sensitivity to high frequencies. Understanding it only made the weight heavier. It meant she would still be powerless the next time they encountered creatures like this. The group threaded through the narrow gap and rounded 2 bends. The ground shifted from piles of broken brick to cracked asphalt. The buildings lining the road grew larger. They had entered the old commercial district. High rises over 10 stories loomed into view, most of their exterior tiles peeled away, with dry, withered vines crawling across exposed concrete. Half-subterranean entry ramps yawned black at the base of each structure. Zhang Feng held up a hand to signal a halt. Everyone crouched down against the shadowed outer wall of a building to catch their breath. The instant Zhou Jigang sat down, a muffled groan escaped him, and fresh sweat beaded thick across his forehead. Xinyu suddenly raised her hand, fingers pressed flat, palm facing down in a silent signal to stay quiet. She tilted her head toward the right rear, the tendons in her neck taut as she angled one ear to listen. 3 seconds passed. Human presence. Xinyu breathed in a near-silent whisper. Single person, trailing us from the right rear. Zhang Feng's hand settled firmly on the handle of his fire axe. Lin Shen spun around, peering back through jagged gaps in the rubble. Some 60 meters behind them, a figure squatted low behind a broken wall, not moving an inch. Having been spotted, the stranger made no attempt to run. She slowly stood upright. A woman, her clothes coated in dust, her hair matted and loose. In her left hand, she carried a canvas sack. Her right hung loose at her sides, palms turned outward in a gesture of surrender. She called out across the 60-meter stretch of open ground, her voice hoarse yet clear. "Don't shoot. I'm alone. I have something you need." Lin Chen did not reply. He exchanged a quick glance with Zhang Feng, who gestured that he would move forward to investigate. Lin Chen shook his head. He told Zhang Feng to stay back and guard the group, then walked out alone into the open space halfway between the two sides. "What do you have?" "I saw your gun." The woman's tone flattened. That gunshot echoed down every street for blocks. "You've drawn attention. More than just me is tracking your group." Lin Chen stared at her without speaking. The woman lifted her canvas sack, widening the opening so he could see its contents. A sheet of paper, folded multiple times, still palm-sized even after being unfolded halfway. The paper had yellowed and turned brittle, its edges rippled from old water stains. "A map," she said. "A complete schematic of all underground facilities in this zone. I dug it out of a filing cabinet on the 3rd floor of the municipal building to the south, buried under collapsed rubble. I spent 4 hours digging it free. It marks every underground pipeline, civil air defense bunker, and subway connecting passage." She paused, her voice sharpening slightly. "It also marks the entrance to a military-grade civil air defense project." Lin Chen's breathing remained steady, but his heart rate spiked instantly. A military civil air defense bunker. Reinforced concrete walls, blast-proof airtight doors, pre-installed independent ventilation ducts. No one could be certain if ordinary underground parking garages would hold up once temperatures plummeted to -40 degrees Celsius. Combined with the shelter blueprint package from the system, a military bunker left no room for doubt. A thought flickered through his mind, and the interface of his system point shop popped up unbidden in his vision. The shop carried no category for military-grade underground facility schematics. This was a resource impossible to buy with points, and it had walked straight up to him in a sack. He suppressed the faint smile tugging at his lips. "What do you want in return?" His speech was slow, his tone devoid of any readable emotion. "Let me join your group." The woman set down the canvas sack. "You have firearms and manpower to keep me safe. That's my only condition." Lin Chen did not answer immediately. He furrowed his brows and pressed his lips together, putting on a show of weighing the pros and cons in deep deliberation. Su Su stood beside the rest of the group, watching Lin Chen's profile. She could read him clearly now. Whenever this man fell silent right away, he had already made up his mind. He only pretended to hesitate. The furrowed brow, the pressed mouth, the drawn-out silence, all an act. He had already crunched all the numbers in his head, simply waiting a calculated number of seconds to avoid seeming overly eager. So the other party would feel they held the upper hand. He must have worked sales in his past life. The silence stretched to 12 full seconds. "What's your name?" "Fong Min, 43 years old." The woman answered a little faster than before. "I worked as a topographic survey engineer at an institute for 20 years before the transport. I didn't just dig this map up, I can read every detail on it. I can distinguish civil air defense bunkers from ordinary basement levels and tell which underground pipelines still retain partial functionality. No one else could parse this whole schematic in 10 minutes flat." She paused again. "I'm not just bringing a map. I am the map." Lin Chen studied her. Adding one more survivor meant an extra 100 settlement points each evening. A military air defense schematic unavailable for purchase in the system shop. A trained specialist capable of translating blueprints into viable construction plans. 3 layers of gain stacked on top of one another. He could have cheered aloud from joy inside his head. On his face, he maintained a reluctant, begrudging expression. "We happen to be lacking an expert with your expertise," he said. "Come along with us." Ding. Qualified survivor detected. Fong Min has joined the shelter. Current shelter population, 9 people. Lin Chen dismissed the virtual screen. 9 members. At 6 o'clock that evening's settlement, he would receive 900 points. Fong Min knelt on the ground and spread out the map. Unfurled, it stretched nearly half the size of a table. The paper was brittle, but mostly intact. Lu Yuan hurried over it once, his fingers sliding quickly along the labeled lines, his lips moving silently as he read. Fong Min tapped a marking with her engineering pencil, a double red border, with most of the original text beside it faded beyond legibility. She had handwritten 3 characters next to it, Class A Air Defense Bunker. Lu Yuan pressed his fingertip to that double red border, his finger trembling faintly. Class A Air Defense. He drew a sharp breath and looked up at Fong Min. "Are you certain it's not Class B?" Fong Min tapped the marking with her pencil again. Double red border with solid red fill, matches the legend perfectly. "It's definitely Class A, no room for error." Zhang Feng frowned, confused. What's the difference between Class A and Class B? Explain it plainly. Lu Yuan turned to face him. The gap is massive. Class B bunkers are just regular basements fitted with a single blast door, built to meet minimal standards. Class A structures are constructed to withstand nuclear strike conditions. Their concrete walls start at 1.2 meters thick, poured as a single reinforced concrete monolith. And their blast-proof airtight doors can absorb dozens of tons of shockwave force. He traced a line across the map with his finger. The most critical advantage is airtight sealing. Class A bunkers come with fully independent air filtration ventilation systems, all intake and exhaust pipes pre-buried. In wartime, they can operate in complete closed-air circulation. At -40°C, even if the outside freezes solid. Closing the doors will cut heat loss by 10 times compared to ordinary basements. Fong Min added another key detail. One more point. Class A air defense bunkers are engineered for a service life of over 50 years, with massive structural redundancy. Even if every surface building collapses completely, the underground core structure will remain standing. Zhang Feng rubbed his chin. How does that stack up against an ordinary underground parking garage? They cannot be compared. Lu Yuan shook his head. Standard parking garages only have thin slab ceilings, heat leaking out like a sieve. Even lighting fires inside won't hold the cold back at -40°. You'll freeze to death sooner or later. Class A bunkers function like built and insulated storage vaults. With minor additional reinforcement, they can withstand extreme temperatures on an entirely different scale. Zhou Jigang leaned against the wall, listening, his lips stirring. If that site hasn't collapsed, does that mean we've got a fighting chance to survive? No one spoke up to answer him, but every pair of eyes drifted toward that red-marked spot on the map. Fong Min dragged the tip of her pencil from their current position to the marker. Straight line distance is 1.5 kilometers. Following the road stretches it to at most 2 kilometers. The entrance sits on the south facade, disguised as a standard parking ramp. The schematic notes a depth of 14 meters underground, split into 2 levels. Lin Chen's eyes lit up as he listened to Fong Min's breakdown. This was unequivocally the best possible shelter location available to them right now. He knelt beside the map, already mentally calculating how to deploy the shelter starter package blueprint atop this Class A air defense bunker. His fingers tapped silently against his knee, and the corner of his mouth lifted barely a single millimeter. Su caught the tiny shift. She knew he was already tallying profits and plans again. Still, she relaxed her crossed arms slightly, glancing from the map to Lin Chen's profile, then back to the blueprint. Lin Chen stood to his feet and glanced up at the sky. The pale gray glow of the overhead dome had deepened to leaden charcoal. The countdown timer in the upper right corner of his system panel ticked quietly. 21 hours, 47 minutes, and 33 seconds. Fold the map. We move out. Fong Min folded the blueprint and stowed it back in her canvas sack. As she straightened, she glanced toward the southeast. Jagged building silhouettes cut a ragged skyline against the leaden haze in the distance. 2 kilometers to go. 9 lives hanging in the balance. 22 hours left until the extreme cold hit. The 2-kilometer trek took 47 minutes to complete. Along the way, they crossed paths with 2 packs of mutated rats, each group only 7 or 8 strong. Xin Yu blew 2 short blasts on her whistle. The rodents flipped onto their backs and scurried into rubble crevices, not daring to glance back. The third encounter was a lone mutated hound. Slightly smaller than the 3 they had faced earlier, rows of bony spines jutted from its pale gray spine. As it crouched in the middle of the road, gnawing an unknown animal's leg bone, Zhang Feng stopped Lin Chen from drawing his handgun. He circled wide to creep up from the rear flank, driving his steel pipe straight into the joint of the hound's hind leg. A crisp crack echoed as bone shattered. The instant the beast crumpled, he brought the fire axe down hard, chopping into the junction between its cervical vertebrae and skull. This time the blade sank deep, cutting roughly 4 centimeters into flesh and bone. The mutated hound twisted and thrashed, unable to break free. Zhang Feng twisted the axe's handle to widen the gash, pulled the blade free, and struck a second decisive blow. Lu Yuan watched the exchange, pushing his glasses up his nose. Solitary specimens have noticeably lower muscle fiber density than adult pack hunters, likely tied to inconsistent nutrient intake. Translate that into plain speech. Zhang Feng shook coagulated blood off his axe blade. Smaller loners are easier to kill. Don't pick fights with large pack leaders. Fong Min walked midway through the group, never letting go of her canvas sack slung over her left arm. She clutched her pencil in her right hand, scribbling new labels on the blank margins of the map as they traveled. At every intersection, she lifted her head to gauge her bearings, scanning the jagged skyline for landmark building outlines before marking a short line on the paper. That curved exterior building up ahead is the old municipal stadium, two-thirds collapsed already. The tip of her pencil tapped the map. Circle around it. Head southeast for 150 meters, and you'll spot the entry ramp. Lin Chen checked his system panel. Countdown remaining. 20 hours, 58 minutes, and 17 seconds. Zhou Jigang's color had improved slightly since they set off. The antibiotics had taken effect, easing the fever burning his forehead. Yet his right leg remained swollen, forcing him to limp heavily with every step. The group rounded the collapsed, curved outer wall of the stadium. The moment the rubble cleared to open ground, every single person froze. A massive concrete vehicle ramp stretched straight ahead of them, wide enough for two trucks to drive side by side. Its surface lined with anti-slip concrete slabs mostly intact, only a few chunks broken off along the edges. Exposed rusted steel rebar jutted from the concrete beam spanning the top of the ramp entrance. Yet the core structural frame showed no deformation at all. The ramp sloped downward, vanishing into pitch-black darkness. Fang Min circled the spot heavily with her pencil on the map. This is the location. Lin Chen stepped forward 2 paces, then came to an abrupt halt. Footprints marked the concrete dust on the ground to the left of the ramp mouth. Not just one set. At least 4 or 5 distinct shoe prints, all oriented straight toward the ramp entrance. Fresh tracks. The disturbed dust around each print had not yet been smoothed flat by the wind. Zhang Feng had spotted them too. He turned to lock eyes with Lin Chen. Lin Chen raised a hand, signaling the entire group to stop. He did not step foot onto the ramp. His gaze swept along the outer walls flanking the entryway. 60 meters to the right, figures shifted in the empty ground floor doorway of a 3-story commercial building. More than one person. Inside the ground floor of the commercial building, Milu leaned against the wall behind the abandoned checkout counter, peering out through the glassless storefront window. 32 years old, close-cropped hair, high cheekbones, thin lips, a faded old scar running down his chin. He wore a military green windbreaker scavenged from somewhere, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing a line of faint tattooed script along the inner side of his left forearm, the words unreadable from a distance. 5 men squatted behind him. 2 burly men, one tall thin frame, one short stocky man, and another wearing a baseball cap. 6 men in total, all male. The burly man leaning against the wall was Daong, bald-headed, his neck thicker than his skull, gripping a thumb-thick steel rebar in his fist. The second large man was a Kun, covered in a thick beard, a homemade crossbow strapped to his back. Its bow arms bent from steel rebar, nylon cord for a string, metal bolts serving as ammunition. Milu narrowed his eyes to study the group outside, counting them silently in his head. 9 people total. The man walking at the head carried a fire axe, moving with disciplined, practiced movements. He was likely ex-military. A tall thin man behind him bore a military backpack, seemingly stocked with ample scavenged supplies. Further back, a tall man with glasses had a mild, scholarly demeanor, posing little immediate threat. In the middle of the line, a man with an injured leg was supported by others, his right limb hanging useless as he walked, effectively incapacitated. Then the women, for an all. Milu's gaze lingered a little longer on each of them. The woman leading the female group wore athletic wear, a steady, confident gait, clutching an unknown object in her hand. Behind her walked a woman with long hair, delicate facial features, her pale skin standing out starkly against the gray, dusty ruins. Next came a woman dressed in medical scrubs. Milu's jaw tightened faintly at the sight of the medical uniform. Medical staff were an extremely valuable resource in this lawless wasteland. The last woman was older, around 40, carrying a canvas sack, unremarkable at first glance. A small child tagged along at the injured man's side, a girl of 7 or 8 years old. Boss. Daong crept closer, speaking in a hushed whisper. This is the group we're targeting? Milu did not turn his head. 2 capable fighters, 1 cripple, 1 bookish civilian, for women, and 1 child. He recounted flatly, as if listing ingredients. Only the man with the axe poses any real danger. The rest are negligible. Should we charge straight in? Daong rubbed the steel rebar gripped in his palms. What's the rush? Milu glanced sideways at him, a mild glance that still froze Daong's movements mid-sentence. Didn't you notice the bulky outline sticking out from the lead man's waistband? A man wearing a baseball cap edged closer. A gun. Most likely. Milu's gaze drifted back to the window. We all heard those 2 gunshots just now. A kilometer away, the direction lines up perfectly. That's their group. Silence hung over the commercial building for 2 beats. De Yong's expression shifted, his grip tightening around the threaded steel rebar in his hands. Milu, however, cracked a smile. It was no expression of joy. It was the grin of someone who'd weighed every possible plan in his head and settled on the most profitable one. What's there to fear about a gun? If he had unlimited ammunition, he wouldn't have only fired twice at the mutated beast earlier. Milu held up 2 fingers. 2 shots total. That means bullets are precious, which means he's running short too. He stood straight and brushed ash off his windbreaker. Don't strike first. Go over there with friendly faces and strike up a conversation. Talk about what? Akun asked. Milu glanced outside. The opposing group had noticed their movement. The man with the axe stood at the front, while the rest closed ranks behind him. Talk about cooperation. Milu zipped his windbreaker halfway up his chest and clapped De Jong on the shoulder. Take a look at those women over there. The one with long hair, the girl in sportswear, and that nurse. He lowered his voice. Once the brutal cold snap hits, the streets will be littered with corpses. When we've got food, water, and a safe shelter to ourselves, we'll be grateful to have capable people like them to rely on. De Jong's Adam's apple bobbed once. Akun bowed his head to check the tension of his crossbow string. Milu took one last glance toward the ramp. The entrance to the Class A Civil Air Defense shelter sat right there. They'd spent half an hour studying it with no way to get the door open. The airtight blast door couldn't be pushed open from the outside. With no electricity or hydraulic power, its purely physical locking mechanism was jammed tight. Brute force wouldn't even pry open a crack. But 9 people were approaching from the opposite side. 1 man with a limp. For women, a small child, and 1 gun with scarce ammunition. Milu smoothed his collar, donning a warm, harmless expression. He held both hands out with palms facing outward and stepped out from the ground floor doorway of the commercial building. Hey, easy now. We're all survivors here. His voice echoed across the rubble, warm and casual, as if he'd run into an old neighbor at the complex gate. Lin Chen stood at the head of his group, Zhang Feng's axe held horizontally before him. Lin Chen watched the approaching man. A placid smile, outstretched empty palms, and 5 more figures filing out of the doorway behind him. Lin Chen's right hand hung loose at his hip, fingertips brushing the grip of the Glock holstered at his lower back. He did not draw the weapon. He smiled back. All survivors. Lin Chen's tone was light, like making small talk. Is that so? Milu led 5 men out of the doorway one after another. The 6 spread out slowly, forming a loose semicircle. Though they looked unhurried, the 2 ends of the arc sealed off the empty ground on either side of the ramp, blocking half their escape route. Milu halted roughly 10 meters from Lin Chen, hands still raised, plastered with an affable grin. My name's Milu. I used to run construction contracting, a small business owner of sorts. He tapped the chest of his windbreaker. I almost got torn apart by mutated rats the day I was transported here. Lucky my brothers had my back. We scavenged some supplies to scrape by ever since. He tilted his head, speaking like someone sharing a table at a street stall. You lot came from the north? How's the situation over there? Lin Chen smiled again. Survivors are thin on the ground. Plenty didn't make it. As he replied, his eyes swept over the 6 men opposite him. De Jong clutched a thumb-thick, threaded steel rebar. The bearded man slung a homemade crossbow across his back, the bolt already loaded in its groove. The stocky short man gripped half a brick in his right hand, and the baseball cap wearer had a length of iron pipe tucked at his waist. 6 weapons in total, all crude makeshift arms. But Akun's crossbow string was pulled taut to its visible limit, stretched to the edge of its elastic capacity. This string had been strung recently, not just for show. You're all heading for that ramp too, aren't you? Milu nodded back over his shoulder. We spotted it this afternoon and spent ages trying to get the door open. No luck at all. Lin Chen stuffed both hands in his jacket pockets. His posture relaxed despite the standoff. Just passing by to take a look. No need to be guarded. Milu took half a step forward and lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. Brother, I'll level with you. This place is a lifesaver. I never had much formal schooling, but I've worked construction for years and seen plenty of underground works. This is clearly a civil air defense shelter. Once we get inside, our lives are secure. He thumped his chest. Join our 2 groups together. Work out a way to open the doors side by side. There's loads of space inside. We'll each take half. When the cold comes, we'll all have somewhere safe to ride it out. The men with me are all steady, honest types. Ain't that right, De Jong? De Jong obligingly stretched his mouth into a grin, a missing front tooth visible as he spoke. Lin Chen said nothing in response. His gaze drifted past Milu's shoulder to the 2nd floor of the commercial building behind him. By the window, a blurry silhouette flickered for a split second before vanishing into shadow. 6 men stood out front, but there were more people upstairs. He pulled his eyes back, his facial expression unchanged. Cooperation sounds reasonable, Lin Chun said evenly. We just need to lay out clear terms first. Mi Lu nodded, the smile lines crinkling deeper at the corners of his eyes. Su Su stood midway through their group, half shielding Tong Tong behind her frame. As Mi Lu spoke, his gaze drifted repeatedly over the women beside Lin Chun, slowly tracing their frames from shoulders down to their legs. First Su Su, then Zhou Qi, lingering briefly on the neckline of her nurse uniform, before shifting to Shun Yu, whose sports jacket zipped up just below her throat, his stare locking on the zipper pull. Su Su knew that look all too well. It was the exact leering stare the 50-something vice president at her old company fixed on interns during annual galas. The way male co-workers would crane their necks to stare at women bending to collect packages in the break room. It held no trace of genuine admiration, only crude appraisal. She pulled Tong Tong firmly behind her back. Shin Yu had noticed too, her brows knitted tight, the arm clutching her whistle lifting half an inch off her side. Mi Lu acted oblivious and turned back to chat with Lin Shin. Is it just the 5 of you here? Lin Shin asked casually, as if asking what they'd had for lunch. Have you run into any other survivor groups? Only the 6 of us. Mi Lu waved a hand dismissively. Haven't seen a soul else. They're either dead or fled far off. 6 people, Lin Chun noted silently, filing the number away with a question mark in his mind. He chose not to call him out on the lie. Mi Lu reached into the pocket of his windbreaker and pulled out a handful of supplies, bending to set them on the ground halfway between the 2 parties. 2 bottles of water, a pack of vacuum-sealed dried meat, a plastic lighter. A token of good faith, he stood upright, grinning. Let your people use them first. I noticed you've got an injured party, someone with a bad leg. Your supplies look thin too. His tone was unervingly amiable, overly warm to the point of suspicion. Lin Shin glanced down at the offerings, genuine, tangible supplies. He did not stoop to pick them up. Let's talk about the door first. Lin Shin lifted his head, redirecting the conversation firmly back to the matter 10 meters away. What methods have you already tried? Mi Lu's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, fast enough to slip past most observers. Yet Lin Shin caught it clear as day. This man hated having the conversation's rhythm dictated to him, just like Lin Shin himself. It's a steel airtight blast door, at least 20 centimeters thick from what we can tell. Mi Lu recovered his composure quickly, switching to a pragmatic tone. The door frame is poured integrally with the surrounding wall, not a single gap to work with. There's no electronic panel outside, only a manual turning wheel and locking latches on either side. 6 of us pried at it with steel rebar for 30 minutes. And the wheel wouldn't shift an inch. The locking mechanism's far too complex for us to figure out. He spread his hands, feigning frank helplessness, like a student admitting he'd flunked an exam. Then his eyes slid sideways, not toward Fong Min, but to the edge of the canvas bag tucked under her arm, peeking out slightly. But it looks like you might have a solution. Fong Min kept her head down, pressing the canvas bag tighter against her side. Her forearm flattened the folded opening shut, hiding whatever contents lay inside. An invisible taut line stretched between the 2 groups after those few exchanged words. Lu Yuan spoke up. How long have you been camped out here? His voice was soft, slow-paced, and the way he pushed his glasses up his nose carried the calm of a lecturer posing a question in class. Mi Lu turned to glance at him. A frail-looking scholar, no immediate threat. He could chat with him easily. Have you noticed the ventilation outlet beneath the ramp? Lu Yuan went on. Class of civil air defense shelters install exhaust vents separate from the main entrance, within 30 to 50 meters of the outer building walls. They're covered by precast concrete slabs measuring 600 by 600 millimeters, bolted down at all 4 corners. Mi Lu's smile vanished entirely for a heartbeat, not out of anger, but the instinctive wariness of someone hearing unfamiliar technical knowledge they could not comprehend. The men behind him exchanged uneasy glances. De Jong scratched the back of his head, and the man in the baseball cap mouthed a silent question. None of them had paid any mind to ventilation vents at all. Lu Yuan pushed his glasses higher, his gaze sweeping calmly over Mi Lu's face. Before we head inside, we first need to confirm if the internal ventilation system still operates at basic capacity. Otherwise, with 9 of you plus our 15 people total breathing in a sealed space, carbon dioxide levels will exceed safe thresholds within 4 hours. A civil air defense shelter isn't a safe haven the second you step through the door. 3 full seconds of silence fell over the scene. Mi Lu forced his smile back into place, though it was far more restrained than before. It's a relief to have someone with expert knowledge on your side, he said. None of us know the first thing about any of this. Fong Min kept her head bowed within her group, silently marking a point in Lu Yuan's favor. Those few lines held a mountain of information, But their core purpose was plain: to make it clear to the opposing group that they could not survive inside the shelter without their expertise. On any negotiation table, the most powerful bargaining chip was never brute force, it was irreplaceable skill. Milu paused to deliberate for 2 heartbeats, shifting his weight from his left foot to his right. "Here's what we'll do," he said, his voice dripping with sincerity. "Our 2 groups cooperate temporarily. We get the door open first, and once inside, there's more than enough room to split the space evenly. No interference between us. My men will handle all heavy labor and outer perimeter sentry duty, while your group takes charge of technical work. A mutually beneficial arrangement." He extended his right hand. "What do you say?" Lin Chen stared at the outstretched palm, feigning deep consideration. His brows creased faintly, lips pressed thin, and his gaze lingered for 2 seconds on the water and dried meat laid out on the ground. Susu watched his back from behind the group. She'd seen this exact posture countless times before. Lin Chen's 3-part tell before making any major choice. Faint smile, pressed lips, prolonged silence. She'd once thought he was weighing his options, but after witnessing it 3 times, she understood the truth. All his mental calculations were finished long before that furrowed brow appeared. The hesitation was nothing but an act. But this time, as she traced the line of Lin Chen's profile, she could not read what truly ran through his mind.